Eileen, you want to read the opening statement, please?
Sure. Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting Monday, November 9th, 2020. I hereby declare this meeting of the Howell Township Zoning Board to be open. Adequate notice having been given pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act in the following manner. First, on December 6, 2019, a copy of said notice was mailed to the Asbury Park Press and the Tri-Town News. Second, on December 6, 2019, a copy of said notice was hand-delivered to the clerk of the Township of Howell. Third, on December 6, 2019, said notice was posted in the office of the Zoning Board and on the bulletin board in the Howell Township Municipal Building, 4567 Route 9, Howell Township, New Jersey. On October 5th, 2020, a notice was sent to both the Asbury Park Press and the Star Ledger that this meeting would be held remotely using communication equipment via Zoom due to COVID-19 restrictions. This meeting is a judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues of what the board may legally consider in reaching their decision, and the decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. This meeting is being videotaped for possible future broadcast on Howell Township TV 77.
Thank you, Eileen. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, you may. Mr. Hughes.
Here.
Mr. Mertens.
Here.
Mr. Moretti.
Here.
Mr. O'Donnell's been excused. Mr. Orozco.
Here.
Mr. Saya has been excused. Mr. Cantor.
Here.
Mr. Gonzalez has been excused, and Chairman Nansen.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Can everyone please stand for the pledge of allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
One
one
nation.
nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Tropley, mind swearing in the professionals, please?
Now, professionals, please remain standing. Do you swear that the testimony you'll give this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
At the record tonight should reflect that we have Mr. Howard, Mr. Cunliffe, Ms. Spiro, and Ms. Beam all sworn for the evening.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Tropley. Approval of minutes.
I have no minutes this evening.
Vouchers.
I have no vouchers this evening.
Wow. Correspondence.
I do have correspondence.
Okay.
Actually, tonight, Tal Holdings 1 LLC and Tal Holdings 2 LLC was originally carried to tonight's agenda, and they had to renotice. I received a letter from Stephen Hambro. Please be advised that the applicant, Tal Holdings 1 LLC and Tal Holdings 2 LLC, is withdrawing their application for the above referenced property. Please ask your professionals to refrain from doing any further reviews and or work relating to this matter. So that is now done. I also,
which one was that? Tal?
the subdivision up on Brickyard and 33.
Okay. Mr. Howard, what's going on there?
What would you like to know?
Well, I know a lot of the reason they were before us was for violations, correct?
No.
That was a subdivision application and variances, but we don't have any active violations there.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering, I thought some of it was for violations.
Nope, not that I am aware of.
Okay, well, I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Okay. I also have a letter from Todd Cohen regarding BA 1926 Oakland Road LLC, which is on tonight's agenda. He said, as you are aware, the undersigned represents Oakland Road LLC with regard to the above referenced matter. This shall confirm our telephone conversation of this morning, wherein I advised I was in receipt of Attorney John Lane's letter of November 6th, requesting an adjournment of this evening's public hearing. Please note that my clients hereby consent to said adjournment and that the public hearing be carried to Monday, December 21st, 2020 at 7 p.m. without further notice to the public. If you should have any questions, please contact my office directly. He did, when we had our phone conversation, say he was also going to grant an extension of time. And I just realized shortly before the meeting that that wasn't in the letter, but I did email him and he said he would give us one through the end of the year.
Okay, so December 31st.
Yes, so that application has to be carried on the record.
Okay, case number BA 1926 Oakland Road LLC. It's a use variance, preliminary and final major site plan will be carried to December 21st. And we have an extension of time to December 31st with no further notifications.
Correct. Thank you. And I don't have a letter, but the other application on tonight's agenda is BA 20-106 Ronco Developers. Their notice was deficient, so they had to be rescheduled. So they will be renoticing, and they were moved into a December meeting as well.
Okay, we don't have a date then, right?
I believe it's December 7th.
December 7th?
Yeah, but they have to renotice, so we don't have to
Yeah,
carry.
no. Okay, case number BA 20-106 Ronco Developers will be carried to December 7th with further notice. They have to notice this.
Correct.
Are they going to give us an extension of time?
They're good till the end of the month.
December 19th, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
all right.
Okay.
I'm also going to send out some meeting dates for next year if all the members could start to look at them, see if they have any questions or comments. And the only other thing is that I still need some members of the Rules Committee to get back to me regarding availability for us to have a Zoom meeting or something, times or whatever, so we can get that done before the end of the year.
Okay. The only one that's online tonight is Mr. Mertens. You did receive my reply, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, excuse me, Arlene, I just sent the email. I'm good any night this month except the 18th.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so whatever the professionals feel, or, you know, I don't think there's anywhere we could meet to have a in-person meeting, so. it
No, so
would
that's
be
why we
Zoom.
said we'll do it by Zoom. And I sent last year's resolution and this year's report for everybody to look over. If you have questions or comments, maybe you can get them back to me before the meeting.
Okay, we're
right.
gonna send out sandwiches, correct?
Okay,
Okay,
and that's all I have. Thank you.
okay, thank you, Eileen.
and one
Okay,
more
I guess we'll move forward, tonight's agenda. How many members? We have 6 members, correct?
Yes, and if just before you get there, the resolution for Brian Mayer, the case of
yes.
the typo, it should be 1925, not 1926.
Okay, 1925.
Yes.
Okay, resolution. Case number BA 1925, Brian Mayer. Resolution granting a use variance, bulk variance, preliminary and final major site plan. Eligible voters: Hughes, Mertens, Moretti, O'Donnell, Orozco, Saya, and Nansen. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Hughes,
I'll second.
seconded by Mr. Mertens. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Mertens,
Yes.
Mr. Moretti,
Yes.
Mr. Orozco,
Yes.
and Chairman Nansen.
Yes,
Motion carries, resolutions memorialized. Thank you.
thank you. Now we'll move to the case on the agenda, case number BA 20-101, Rock Solid Realty LLC. Use variance, preliminary major site plan with bulk variances. Application of Rock Solid Realty LLC is applicant and owner seeking a use variance preliminary major site plan approval with bulk variances to construct a 368,050 square foot warehouse with associated office space on premises known as 36.38 on proposed 36.38 lease acres, portion of 101.88 acre parcel. They're also proposing associated site improvements, including parking lot, stormwater infrastructure, new utility connections, lighting, landscape on premises known as Block 168, Lot 1910, Fairfield Road. Expiration date, January 13th, 2021. Mr. Pape.
Mr. Chairman, board members, board professionals, and public, good evening all. My name is Kenneth Pape. I'm an attorney with Howell Pape, and this evening I have the responsibility and the privilege of representing your applicant, Rock Solid Realty. Before we begin any substantive presentation, I'd ask, Mr. Chair, if you could confirm either through your secretary or counsel that our notices were received and they were proper and jurisdiction is established.
Mr. Tropoli.
Yes, the notices are in order, and the board has taken jurisdiction. And Mr. Pape, I noticed that we have 6 members this evening. You're entitled to a full board. May I have your opinion as to proceeding tonight? And if you wish to proceed, hold the vote, or just what your thoughts may be, sir.
Surely. So at this early hour, the decision to proceed is made. We're looking forward to making this presentation. We appreciate that the 6 members who are here this evening have gathered. Mr. O'Donnell, who's not feeling well, please give our best wishes. My request would be at the conclusion of the presentation, if we have not completed the presentation, I understand that we would be carried to the 16th. If we do complete the presentation, I will ask for 5 minutes to go offline to share with my client some guidance and then return to advise the board as to whether we wish to carry for vote or go to a vote. Would that be acceptable, Mr. Tropoli?
It is. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, Mr. Pape, how many witnesses do you have to bring forth?
There are 4 professional witnesses, and my client, Keisler Wong, is available. I did not intend to call Mr. Wong. I don't think that there's a need, but I wanted the board to know that the owner of the property and your applicant is here and listening in and could become available, and that could be a 5th.
Okay.
4.
Mr. Tropoli, you mind swearing in everybody?
Not at all. We should probably swear Mr. Wong in as well, just in the event.
Okay, Mr. Keisler Wong, if you could come off the mute so you could be sworn in and be available to testify.
Does Mr. Wong have
I don't think he's on video. I think he only has.
Very good.
Wonderful.
Let's see.
Please,
It looks like we have everyone, Mr. Pape. So with that, I'm going to ask your witnesses to please raise your right hands and take an oath. Do you swear that the testimony you'll give this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
I do.
A little difficult to see here, but let's see. Mr. Radasti, your name, please.
Stephen Radasti?
Thank you. Next witness, Mr. Zugner.
Yes, Louis Zugner, Zuegner.
Okay, thank you. Christine.
Good evening, Christine Cofone, C-O, F as in Frank, O-N-E.
Thank you. Next is John Ray, for the record.
John Ray, R-E-A.
Thank you. And Mr. Wong, for the record, please.
Mr. Wong, if you could put your microphone on.
Right, he's muted. Yeah.
Could
See
you,
if I can-
If we call him, we'll get that name on the clarification.
I can,
Okay, we won't proceed then.
Yeah, we can proceed. Mr. Pape, we'll qualify each witness as they're called to testify.
Wonderful.
That's okay.
Thank you. I have to tell you, I've been doing this for 40 years. The first 3 minutes of every single hearing, I still get butterflies. They're just starting to settle down. If I may, I have some opening remarks. I have an outline to share with the board so that you have a sense of where we would like to go this evening. And then I have a little bit of history of the site to share with you. I'll be brief. I have had the privilege of representing Keisler Wong and his family for more than 20 years, and it's a true privilege. We have worked in a number of locations, and he is, including here in Howell. Previously, in 2011, Mr. Wong and I and his professional team came before your board and requested a use variance to develop this property with a solar farm. And that was approved, and it was a 17 megawatt solar farm. The approval process was complicated and went through state agencies, and the state agencies reduced the solar farm from 17 megawatts to 10 megawatts. That was a fairly typical experience back in the 2011-2012. I'm told it was a response by the state to the very large number of solar farms that were coming online. So this property has been developed, 65 acres of this property has been developed as a solar farm that has been generating electricity that New Jersey Natural Gas's subsidiary, NJR, has been feeding into the grid for approximately 7 years. That exists, doing very well, and it's in place. But approximately 35 acres that was scheduled to be the other 7 megawatts was not developed. It is high and dry land. It's land that is suitable for development. And this evening, we're asking this board's permission to put a warehouse on it, a one-story warehouse of approximately 368,000 square feet in size that is designed to accommodate 1, 2, 3, or 4 tenants. You'll hear from the architect and from the engineer how the building has been designed to accommodate, how the building and the site have been designed to accommodate that proposed use. The property, many years ago, and I want to make sure that this was cleared, many years ago, this property experienced something that it's going to make it live in infamy. For those who remember, this was the property where meadow life was created. Someone decided to harvest solid waste from sewer treatment plants and spread it on this property, and dry it out, and give it a name of meadow life and try to sell it as fertilizer. It was a disaster, and it resulted in this property having to be cleaned up. And our client, Mr. Wong, during his ownership, completed the entire environmental cleanup of the property. Just wanted everyone to know that somewhat checkered past is deeply in the past and no longer carried forward. Prior to coming before this board, we did a number of things, as you might expect from someone of Mr. Wong's qualities and our respect for this board and the township. We spent time with your fire chief. We spent a lot of time with your professionals. I think for some, we're up to the 3rd review letter. We met on the site with Ms. Spiro. We actually had personal meetings with the fire chief, the architect, and I met with the fire chief. We have secured a county approval. It's in place. We have our NJDEP LOI in place. All of the wetlands have been placed into conservation easements. And so we have done considerable work. One thing that we have not done, and I want to bring to your attention, we're scheduled to go to the Environmental Commission a number of times, and we were unable to keep appointments. Sometimes it was my fault, sometimes it was theirs. We do have a meeting with them on November 12th, and anything that this board is comfortable approving, we will say right up front that we know that we have to comply with the guidance of the Environmental Commission, and we will do so. The presentation this evening will be made by 4 professionals. The four professionals will be in the following order. Louis Zugner is the design engineer. And because this is not a bifurcated application, because it is a site plan and a use variance request, there will be some detail to his engineering testimony on the site plan. I've asked that Mr. Zugner begin with his testimony just to orient everyone, bring everybody to the property, describe existing conditions, describe the proposal, and then to work with me to go into detail on all of the site plan elements. Our architect is Steve Radasti. Steve Radasti, who is still glowing from the compliment that Jennifer Beam gave him a couple of weeks ago, designed this building, working with Mr. Wong. And we were talking about it today. I don't think Mr. Radasti has ever spent as much time with a client as he did with Mr. Wong, working out materials, colors, and details, all of which were very important to him. So Mr. Radasti will take us through the architectural features of the building. For the record, one compliment a year is enough. We're not looking for another compliment. We're just hoping that we pass muster. The third witness who will testify this evening is John Ray. John Ray and his firm have gone to the DOT and have confirmed with the DOT that the Route 33 interchange, Fairfield Road, Route 33 interchange, can handle the truck traffic. There's considerable truck traffic going through it now. They have given us some guidance and direction on ways that we can, I'm going to say, tweak or smooth out the rough edges of the interchange. But you'll hear that that investigation was done and that we'd be pleased to make all of those improvements. The final witness is always the star, Christine, is our planner, and her testimony follows all of the facts that are shared by the first three fact witnesses. She has a very high responsibility of identifying how this application meets with your master plan, your zoning ordinance, and the neighborhood in which it is located. I wanted to point out a couple of things that are a little unusual, and I think they're special. I wanted to point them out before we started the presentation. There's no sewer on Fairfield Road. And in fact, the nearest available sewer is 7,000 feet away. And this entire area of the township has not been sewered. The cabin restaurant and all the new businesses that are opening on 33 at this end of 33 are not sewered. Our client is going to offer as an element of his presentation to design and secure all the permits and to build the 7,000 foot force main, well, it goes all the way out to 524, and to design and build the pump. And you'll hear that he is prepared to design it in a way that many of the properties along the 33 corridor will be able to tie into it. And I want to make this statement. A 368,000 square foot warehouse could be designed on a septic system. Mr. Wong's offer to the neighborhood and to the town that he'll take the responsibility of bringing the sewer. Along the way, as we were working on this project, we learned from township representatives and from your professionals that there's an existing flooding condition that occurs on Fairfield Road. It's not attributed to this site. It's not exacerbated by the proposed development. But again, Mr. Wong authorized his engineering team, Mr. Zugner and Mr. Wesolowski, his associate, to identify the problem and if possible to solve it. And you're going to hear that that is going to be part of the proofs that are offered. Those are unusual proofs. I wanted to bring them to your attention before we started. With that as our opening, Mr. Chairman and board members, I'd ask if we could have Mr. Zugner sworn, Mr. Zugner share with all his professional credentials, and then I'll ask that he be permitted to testify this evening as an expert in civil engineering.
Okay, Mr. Pape, I just wanted to add to that, to your opening too. I was on the board, and I don't know if anybody else was on the board back in the day, but Rock Solid was before with the commercial element to the property, along with the apartments going to be built with, along with the Habitat for Humanity,
Yeah.
the 9-hole golf course, you know, and they did a lot of environmental work during that point, you know, as directed by the board at that time too. And I gotta say, you know, everything that's been said has been kept, you know, to the word, even down to the solar farm being approved in there. You know, Mr. Wong has kept his word on everything so far. So looking forward to hear your testimony.
Mr. Zogner, your education and professional background, please.
Great. Good evening, everyone. I am a professional engineer licensed in the state of New Jersey. I have a degree in civil engineering from Virginia Tech, and I have been practicing in this field for quite some time. I graduated in 1994, so it's been a while. I am the founding principal of Mid-Atlantic Engineering based here in New Jersey. And I've testified before zoning and planning boards across the state, including before this board in the past.
We'll accept your credentials.
Thank you. Mr. Zogner, I'm going to ask if you could begin by introducing some exhibits. I know that Mr. Howard and others are serving as a host. If you announce the exhibits that you'd like to be brought up, you can do them one by one. I'd like to get the aerial, the site plan, and the sewer plan at a minimum brought up and marked at this time.
If someone would have to enable screen sharing for me.
Is that, would you like to do it that way, Ms. Urbano, or is there someone from the town that will put the screens up?
Matt have put them up, I believe.
Okay, good. We'll begin with the aerial.
Give us 1 minute. I don't think I have an aerial. I just have the site plans. So we can give Mr. Zugner sharing capabilities and he can put the aerial up if he has an aerial.
Workloads?
It would be great if I could share. That would be my preference.
Just give us 1 second. Nothing? 1 minute. If you can forward that to me in an email, we can put it up. For some reason, we can't get you to share.
Okay, I'll send a couple in a row.
Host disable participant screen sharing. That was
I
something.
also noticed this is all on the high side of that site, which is good.
This is all on the high side. All of the environmentally constrained properties are already preserved. The entire development plan is on the side.
The opposite side, yeah.
I have emailed both an aerial and a rendering to you, Ms. Urbanos. Hopefully you'll receive those soon.
One of my favorite Einstein expressions is that an hour sitting with a pretty girl passes so quickly, but a minute sitting on a hot stove seems like infinity. As we sit here and wait, just seems to be a seamless anecdote.
So I received the aerial, but nothing else.
The next one should probably follow in a minute. I know they're both big files.
While we're waiting for that one to arrive, Mr. Chair, if we could begin, this is the important first exhibit from which Louis would testify. Well, Ms. Urbano, interrupt us when the other one becomes available, please.
Okay.
Okay, so Louis, if you would, looking at the aerial, if you could describe where we are in Howell Township, perhaps describe the roadway system that's at the top of the page, the roadway system that's in front of our property. And after that, we'll do the surrounding activities and uses, and we'll zoom into the center of the property.
Great. So what we have here is a aerial image, and obviously centered is our parcel. We've outlined our property limit, the overall property limit in red. Across the top, sort of descending from top left towards the right, is Route 33. And you can see the middle of the screen is where 33 and 33 business separate. And then heading south from that intersection and along the right-hand side of our property is Fairfield Road. Fairfield Road then continues down off the screen to Bennett Road, which would be the next intersection south of us. You can see how the site sits now in this image. This is existing aerial.
And Louis, if you could go around the perimeter and just identify some of the uses that are apparent.
Sure. And I think it goes without saying, but just for identification, we are block 168, lot 19.10. And as a sort of scale of framework, our property is about 700 feet south of the exit ramp from 33. In this area, you can see, some surrounding uses. If you head south towards Bennett Road, which is a bit off of this screen, there are several homes, residences in that direction, and then a series of light industrial properties in and around Bennett Road. To the north of us, there are a couple of homes as you approach 33. Then, of course, commercial uses in and around 33 and 33 business. Across the street from us, across Fairfield, it's not shown in this aerial, but obviously under construction is what was a New Jersey natural gas property. And that's under construction now. The remainder is farmland or otherwise undeveloped parcels. And back into the woods, I believe, is actually county-owned property.
If you could go on to our client's property, and if you could assist all of us in understanding where the solar field is constructed, and then identify that portion of the property that we're asking the board to consider this evening.
Certainly. You can see from the image, the aerial, you can see in sort of the gray color where the solar panels are. And there's a gravel road extending from Fairfield, sort of a lighter sandy color in this picture, that provides access to that solar field. And the property is neatly split at the moment. There actually is a fence and a clear delineation running down along the edge of the solar field, and then access roads through it. The overall parcel, the entirety of the property, is over 100 acres, 101.88 acres. But what's been referred to, I think, briefly in the opening, and we've talked about as a lease area, but the area we're looking at for this proposed work is 36.48 acres. And that's more or less the rectangular shape with the frontage, its long side along Fairfield Road on the right-hand half of that property.
Just one other, and if you just identify where our railroad neighbor is, just so everybody knows.
So sort of diverging from 33 at the top, you can see the linear line running along the bottom of our property, and that is a railroad right-of-way. The tracks themselves, I believe, end above 33 at, I think, the Honeywell property. And so really through this area, while it's an easement, it's mostly overhead wires. There might be some remnants of tracks, but it's not an active railroad through there.
Those wires were so important when the solar facility was being approved by the state agency because it was a way of getting the electricity up into the grid. If you could describe, and I don't know if you can do it from this exhibit, you tell me, but I'd like the board to know where the zone line changes. We're surrounded by another zone. If you could just share with the board where that zone line changes.
So I think I can from the aerial.
You want to put up the site plan?
No, I think from this one, I'll describe the zoning. Thank you.
Okay.
Our property itself is HD2 zone, a highway development zone. And our property alone is that zone. And essentially 3 sides surrounding our parcel, to the top left, towards 33, towards the right, is the SED zone, the Special Economic Development Zone. And then some portion of what's below us is in the ARE6, but we're nearly surrounded by SED.
And Mr. Chair and board members, you may already know, you'll hear later from Christine, but in November of 2019, the master plan for Howell was amended to show that the property that we present to you should be rezoned SED. And so that would then make it consistent, Louis, with the surrounding properties?
Correct, yes.
I think if you could just take a few more moments to describe the vegetation that exists in the area that we're proposing to develop, and then we'll get to the part we've been waiting for, your description of.
So looking at what I call the lease area, the rectangle, you can see that the area we're talking about is predominantly open. There's some sandy, lighter colored areas. There's some green fields. And then there are a couple of packets, tree areas. One across the property line to the top of this, the north, some along the railroad easement at the bottom, an area of trees in the middle of the property. And then what looks like almost a large oval at the bottom of our property. That's actually a conservation easement. So that was identified as wetlands in the prior development. It was set into a conservation easement, which was filed. And so that is area that's within a conservation easement and is wetlands and would not be touched by this work. But the remainder is predominantly open fields with some trees in a couple of parts.
If you could take us into the site plan. Oh, before we leave this, Mr. Tropoli, should we mark this as an exhibit? Should we identify it as an exhibit?
Yes, we should. And look, by my calculations, the number would be A27, Eileen. You can confirm that. A27 for the aerial.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and again, for the record, it's been identified by your witness as an aerial of the subject property and surrounds. And while we're at it, Mr. Pape, your next number would be A28.
Okay.
So once the site plan is displayed on the board, if your client would just identify that as well for the record, thank you.
Mr. Zugner, I never got your second email though.
I'll try and send it again now.
Okay.
Or we'll, well, you'll, ah,
If possible, I'd hope we could wait a moment and see if the colored rendering comes through. Might be a little easier to follow.
Oh, you don't have to bring it up to them. Oh. Okay. Okay, I got a rendering from the landscape.
Yes.
Okay, 1 second, then I have to send it to Matt.
when we manage our expectations, we can step back and realize this is all a miracle that we're able to do this.
There you go.
Thank you.
So, from time to time, if we need to zoom in, Mrs. Urbano, we could do that. Or Matt, if we, not yet, but okay, wonderful. So let's zoom out, and Lewis, from 5,000 feet above the planet, you could give us a description of the proposed development plan.
Great. So just quickly, this plan is labeled site rendering and it's dated today. And this does not show new or different information from what was submitted in the site plan and the application. This is simply colored to help us all follow here on the screen.
So A28 is a site rendering dated November 9th, 2020, prepared by Mid-Atlantic Engineering, correct?
Correct.
Very good. Let's proceed.
So this is because of the shape of what we're looking at. I had this turn, but Fairfield Road now is running left, right across the bottom of the screen, with south being to the left. And in the center, in sort of a burnt orange color, this is the proposed building. Obviously rectangular. This is the warehouse building itself. You can see in the four corners, they're marked office space, each of the four corners, and talk about that a little further in a minute. But the overall building is 368,050 square feet. That's all inclusive of office space and warehouse space. Of that, 9,600 is potentially office in the four corners. You can see in sort of a yellowish or speckled color, this is where the loading docks would be on either side of the long ends of the building. And it's shown in that color because that would actually be a concrete surface. It's a much more durable surface for where the trucks would actually maneuver in and out of the building. The grayer shaded color, that's the paved sections of the site. And then green, it's a little bit misleading as to what exactly is green and not green because we've overlaid it on aerial. But it's showing basically where we would be moving dirt or touching the site in some way or another. You can see the longer striped lines.
On the loading dock, is that, what size trailers are going to be able to be assisted there? Basically, is that going to be long enough for their loading, their landing gear to land on the concrete, or?
Yes, in fact, so the entire truck, the trailer and the tractor component would be on the concrete at the loading docks.
Okay.
And if you look to what would be the back left away from Fairfield Road, they're longer spaces. And those are actually trailer parking spaces. And you can see across those there's a concrete strip created so that if the trailer is disconnected from the tractor, the landing feet sit on a concrete strip and not on the pavement.
Okay.
Again, for durability reasons, that prevents the sort of feet digging into the regular asphalt.
Okay.
The paving spec here in it, itself is thicker. It's a heavy duty paving for circulation for the trucks. And then you can see that we've segregated vehicle parking spaces at either end of the building. In this picture, you can also see in sort of a bluish color, there are a couple of stormwater components along the back where we separate from the solar. There's some water quality components that are like a forebay that then drain into what would be a wet pond, which then discharges towards the wetlands.
With your permission, Lois, I think that's a fairly good overall review. I'd like to go through with specificity those items that you've been working on the past year under Mr. Cunliffe's review, and to a lesser extent, Ms. Spiro's review and Ms. Bean's review. I'm going to ask if we could start by talking about the grading of this site. What was necessary, or what will be necessary for this site to accommodate the proposed building and parking areas?
So,
Mr. Tate,
Yes, sir.
before we move forward, could we go to sheet number 3 of 31 real quick? Is the existing conditions on the site?
Absolutely. Is that a request from Mr. Howard to bring that up?
And
Yeah.
can you either increase your volume or speak closer to, because we're not catching everything you're saying.
I'm glad you told me. I can
Thank
do
you.
both of those.
Perfect.
That's the sheet. There's some existing structures. I just, you know, I go by there quite a bit, but a lot of those exist, like the house that it shows there, that's gone, correct? Or is that still on the premises?
That's,
I thought all of that was demolished a long time ago.
Miss, I was there yesterday, and I'm not positive. I thought that it was there.
Just to my experience in the last couple of weeks, I've driven past there as well. We kind of keep a tally on some structures that maybe need to be demolished in the future. I'm pretty sure that one's still there.
Okay, I just was wanting to verify that because a lot of the stuff has to be demolished in, you know, proper closures of septics and water wells existing.
that structure is still there. It's very buried in some dense vegetation, so it's hard to see from the street.
Okay.
And it does need to be demolished.
Okay, and so y'all are gonna do the septic removal and proper closure of the water well existing?
Yes.
We'll put on the record that it would be a condition of any relief granted.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, Mr. Chairman, it's your meeting to interrupt all night. Mr. Zogner, grading. Let's just talk about grading and how the site has to be regraded to accommodate what we propose.
So for this particular use, this site is very accommodating to what we need to do for grading. And the proposed development will essentially mimic very closely drainage patterns and grading patterns that exist there now, draining on this sheet from right towards left. And while we're not entirely finalized in terms of our calculation, we believe we're very close and we'll be able to balance the site.
So some cutting and some filling, but don't anticipate any exporting or importing.
Correct. There might be some excess topsoil that we'll have to look at what volumes of topsoil come off and what can go into berming and where that goes, but we should be balanced.
And if you could then take us to stormwater management, brief overview, and then I'd like to go through some very specific elements of the stormwater plan.
I would first note that with solar development, there are not stormwater improvements or basins required. They're exempt. So we are introducing stormwater management. We are, as I mentioned before, creating a series of basins and a wet pond to deal with control of runoff, water quality, and infiltration per all of the guidelines, both state and local.
So I think it's very important that the record reflect that you are aware of the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection stormwater management requirements, all of them, volume, water quality, infiltration. You are familiar with them, and this system will comply with all of those DEP requirements.
It will, yes.
Similarly, Howell Township has their standards. Much of them are based on and are similar to the DEP, but Howell has their own standards. You could affirm that you are familiar with those standards, and the system will comply with all of those standards.
It will, and obviously we've worked hard to show that and work with Mr. Cunliffe on getting to the finish line on all of the stormwater.
One last, and I think this is significant too. This is a stormwater system that will be privately owned and maintained. And for the record, Mr. Chair and board members, privately owned and maintained will mean that the property owner is solely responsible for all costs associated with the basin. Of course, we would empower the township to enforce the maintenance of that through easements that benefit the township, and the township always has the ability to make repairs and to tax the property. But it is intended to be a private system under the private ownership and private maintenance of the property owner, and to create no burden on the township.
Mr. Pape, while we're on that subject, how, I know you're probably going to get into it, but being a private system, okay, that portion of Fairfield Road floods right through there.
Yep.
How are you gonna, I guess, direct that water from Fairfield Road into a private system?
Mr. Chairman, great introduction. Lewis and I are working from a written outline, and he's smiling because it's very next to me. Mr. Zogner, I'm going to ask if you could describe the flooding condition that was brought to our attention, the existing swale system that is there, and the nature of the improvements that our client proposes and authorizes. I don't know if you've answered the chairman's question about where's that water going.
So in its current condition, water moves down Fairfield Road to the south from right to left, then works its way off of Fairfield Road onto our property in this area, and then into what I described before, this conservation easement. There are a couple of challenges there. One, in terms of enough space to get that water off of Fairfield Road, and then getting it into the wetlands in this conservation easement, because while the wetlands are low, there's actually a sort of high area that surrounds this low pocket of wetlands. And what we discovered through a significant amount of research and digging through the woods is that there is existing but old infrastructure that helps carry some of that water to these wetlands that needs to sort of be refreshed and made new again. And additionally, as part of what we're proposing, we feel we can create as part of the other frontage improvements along Fairfield Road, a much better swale system with additional low areas getting down to that, so that we do get a lot of water off of Fairfield Road and alleviate that flooding, move it towards the wetlands and get it off the road.
So what you're saying, you're going to be going into that conservation easement, correct?
The only element, so we don't want to go into the conservation easement because it requires lifting of the easement.
Right.
But there are pipes that connect the low areas of our site into that easement. And we believe with some repair and maintenance work outside of the easement and to those pipes, it will flow into there. Additionally, we hope to create more of a low area outside of that conservation easement on our property to help water off of Fairfield Road through these swales.
Okay,
So,
is it gonna require any outside agency permitting since it is a conservation easement of you going into there?
no, the only work that would be at the conservation easement would be maintenance of those existing pipes.
Okay,
And so, no, we don't anticipate requiring a permit or needing to lift that conservation easement to do the work we've envisioned based on our study. I think going back to your original question, this water is somewhat separate from the water we would have on our site. This water off of Fairfield Road would not make it or go to our wet pond. It would be through a different system of swales along Fairfield Road.
Charlie, hey, is Charlie online?
He is online.
I got a question for him.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, there you are, Charlie.
I apologize. I had the wrong mic on. I apologize.
That's okay.
I'm talking here and I'm like, why is no one listening to me?
My concern is, and I know we went through this whenever Rock Solid was before us before, and we had MAP athletics across the street. Do you feel comfortable that the existing infrastructure that is there is going to be able to handle this water?
So what I will say is, and I think Louis kind of breezed over it a little bit. So just to clarify for your perspective, for the board's perspective, Mr. Chair, pretty much from the southern driveway. So in this picture, the leftmost driveway, all the way to the right-hand portion of the screen, that's all going to be curb with shoulder that has curb cuts incrementally that drains into a drainage swale, right, Louis? And then on the south side of that driveway, there's a flared end section which receives that swale and will route it into their wet pond and then ultimately into this conservation easement area. So they're taking a significant amount of runoff from Fairfield Road from the north and getting it off the road into the swale, into their stormwater management system, and ultimately into that wetlands area there. From
Yeah,
this,
he was saying it wasn't going into their
so from the south, right? So from the southern terminus of their property on Fairfield Road to the southern portion of their site driveway, that's going to be curb with shoulder. There's some existing drainage infrastructure there that I think Mr. Zugner alluded to that needed to be inspected, cleaned, possibly maintained and improved. And there's also going to be incremental curb cuts to let that some of that water naturally overland flow off the edge of the road into the conservation easement area. I think it may need a little bit more work as like a condition of approval. You know, something that can be worked off between Louis and myself with maybe some additional grading or some additional curb cuts. But I think right now, as the site exists, you have a significant amount of water that comes from the north to that low area that's no longer going to be flowing there. It's going to be routed into the applicant stormwater management basin. So that's going to be a wholesale improvement in itself. And then I think obviously with some curb cuts will help kind of channelize some of that flow off to the road from the south. And I think we can work that out as a condition of approval between Louis' office and my office. And then just to clarify, Mr. Chairman, so on the west side of the conservation easement, so that oval shape on the southeast corner of the property, there's two existing pipes that go through the conservation easement collecting the surface runoff from the solar portion of the site. They're proposing to tie into that with their discharge. They're not disturbing the pipe within the conservation easement. Louis, correct me if I'm wrong. It's just going to be, possible cleaning of the pipe and maybe lining if it's required, if there's, an issue with a hole in the pipe or something like that. But all disturbance will be outside of the conservation easement. Is that correct?
It is correct. And I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, if I wasn't clear enough about when I was talking about sort of separated, Mr. Cunliffe described it correctly. The southern portion separated from some of the swaling to the northern portion.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that was clear. But my question is, have you looked at that existing pipe? Is that big enough, or the size-wise big enough to handle the runoff that you're proposing?
So what we're gathering through the swale system, yes, we've sized that. We believe that is sufficient and gets the water off of the road. The more southern area, that needs repairs, and that's what I was talking about earlier. We've dug through that. That needs some repair work, the pipes and a couple of structures that aren't draining. So we think between the combination of all those, it will ameliorate the flooding from Fairfield Road. We think some of the swales and things on our site will carry a lot of water, and that's part of how we've designed the system.
Okay. But so you do feel, pretty positive as far as the sizing of the pipe that's existing, that it's going to be able to handle the water.
Yes.
Okay.
And-
Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you for helping us. Mr. Chairman, I want to make one point. These flooding conditions on Fairfield Road are existing conditions. These are not conditions that are created by the proposed development. Mr. Zerner, I need you to answer this one. And these are not conditions that are exacerbated in any way by the proposed development. Is that an accurate statement?
That's correct, yes.
So all of this is being offered because this is road frontage in front of our client's property. And he is taking it upon himself to make these commitments to the town, so that not only is his property benefited, but the community in which his property is located is benefited.
Mr. Pape.
Elaine, I don't know if it's me or what, but I still am having difficulty in hearing Mr. Pepe.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to have to really get on top of my microphone here.
Okay.
Okay. The point that I was just making is these are existing conditions not created by the applicant or exacerbated by the applicant. The applicant is taking it upon himself to make the improvements for the benefit of his own property and the neighborhood in which his property is located.
Yes.
Mr. Kugner confirmed that.
Yes.
Okay. I apologize for, I'm hoarse this evening, and maybe that's but I'm going to speak a little bit louder. If you could, Louis, circulation, begin with the driveway system on Fairfield Road. If you could just describe the flat and straight roadway to which we're attached, and just take us around the property with a truck and then with a car. Know this, John Ray, the traffic consultant, is going to be coming up a little bit later, and the in-depth details will come from Mr. Ray.
Certainly. So and you can see obviously in this rendering, we have two access points, and those are separated by approximately 800 feet. You come into the site and we have full circulation around this building. There's no one-way or limited directional access in terms of our site. The outer loop, which is really the truck circulation, all of those aisles are 30-foot aisles for the truck. So they're wider than traditional passenger vehicle lane. The parking lots for the passenger vehicles or the regular cars, those are 25-foot aisles if you were to pull into the parking areas. You can see in the upper right hand of this plan, there's a reconstructed access point if maintenance or vehicles needed to get back to the solar fields. And I would note that in the actual, the truck areas, those are controlled by arm gates so that trucks don't come any time of day or night without controlled access. Those are well off of Fairfield Road. So tractor trailers can get well off the road before they encounter any type of limitation, and that outer loop allows them to get back into the site. And all car vehicles can come and go without any control access of any kind. I would also note that the circulation and what's here had been shown, and these plans do accommodate input from the fire chief, Mr. Lewis.
So all the dimensions of all of these travel ways were presented to the fire chief, correct, Lewis?
Correct, yes, including with circulation diagrams for the fire vehicles and making the turns.
Okay. And if you could identify you did earlier identify the areas of trailer storage, and just speak to the trailer storage areas one more time, where they're located and how they're accessed.
Sure. So you can see those along the left-hand side toward the wet pond and in the back. And those have been pushed towards the back of the site to move that trailer parking away from Fairfield Road.
I'm going to ask if we could go to the landscaping elements of the plan. You know, that Mr. Chairman, board members may be familiar with. There was a landscape plan required along Fairfield Road as part of the solar facility.
Yeah.
Solar facility were solar panels that were set 4 to 6 feet above the ground. So although there's a berming and landscaping in place, it's not the type of berming and landscaping that this board and this board's professionals would ask for a warehouse type building. We'll identify that it's there. And then I'm going to ask Mr. Zugner to describe the types of revisions that Ms. Spiro requested and how he accommodated. And then we'll go through the site with the balance of the landscaping. We're going to end up in the southern side, Mr. Zugner, talking about some things I think we might have missed that we better get on the plan. So if you could start with Fairfield Road.
Sure. So the four-season or farmland 50-foot buffer along Fairfield Road, it's not necessarily jumping out on this plan, but there's a black dashed line, and you can see in white 50-foot farmland buffer into the center of the plan, correct. On review, through some of the plan reviews had been mentioned here, site improvements that had been in or near that have all been pulled back. So site signage, light poles, all those types of elements based on review, some other utility elements like a hot box, which I can describe. We've pulled those, while they might still be in that area, they are outside the 50-foot buffer in plan revisions that happened a while ago. You can sort of see here where we've mixed green with existing aerial footage. There was a berm and there were trees that were planted through this area. And I know my office had met with Ms. Spiro and walked this. And the intent really is that where that was existing, where it had good trees that had been planted and already had started to grow, was to maintain that and to create new plantings that enhance that. And where the enhancements are proposed, that includes both plantings and grading. So where possible, we would increase the berming and push dirt higher and then plant upon top of it. So that 50-foot farmland buffer, that's what's being proposed, is maintaining what was good and enhancing it where it was necessary. But you can see some of the enhanced plantings are actually outside the 50-foot farmland buffer because there's already vegetation in the 50-foot farmland buffer. Our curb is another close to 30 feet, 28 feet beyond the 50-foot buffer. I would note that the swale we talked at great length about does move along Fairfield Road through this area. We think it's obviously important, but that is within the street side of this farmland buffer.
So if you could confirm that the only encroachments in the farmland buffer are the driveways, which are specifically exempt by the ordinance, and the swale, which pre-existed and is there for a very important purpose, for which we're asking this board for relief to allow it to remain.
Correct. The swale, the two driveway entrances, and then underground utilities, which obviously connect for the building.
And if there's any disturbance associated with underground utility connections, the applicant is obligated to restore those areas. And I would say restore those areas to the satisfaction of the board's professionals and especially Ms. Spiro.
Yes.
The monument signs that we'll talk about a little bit later have all been pulled out of that farmland buffer area. Is that correct?
Correct. There's one monument sign at each drive entrance. Again, they're about 800 feet apart, but those are back more than 50 feet. They've been pulled back, so they're not in that buffer.
If you could then take us around the site and just briefly describe the types of landscaping that you're showing throughout the site.
So at either end where the passenger parking is, and again, you can see symbols here, but there are foundation plantings and trees proposed in those islands and along the base of the building at those two ends. Additionally, you can see that there's some screening and plantings around a couple of elements as you come in the drive, which we can talk about. But the first being labeled hot box. This is a required utility item. When we bring in a water line from New Jersey American, they will require us to have this structure. It's above ground. We believe we've pulled it back as far as they will permit us to put it. And then we've proposed plantings around it. Behind that, you can see labeled also a pump station, which we can talk about again in a little more detail, but that's necessarily in this front yard in order to create our force main and pump it out. That's also screened and pulled well back beyond. That's actually beyond both the buffer and the front yard setback.
I note that you have landscaping. I note that I'll take that back. You just described that. It was brought to our attention. It was brought to our attention in the staff reports, I think Ms. Beam's report, that the landscaping in the southern end of the building is by ordinance requires a buffer landscaping, and that we don't have a planted buffer landscaping area. Now, that's the area that includes the conservation easement, and it includes the woodlands that are along the railroad. But Ms. Beam is accurately stating that no buffer plantings are proposed. And we've asked that you examine the plan to determine where additional plantings could be installed to create the greatest benefit of providing a buffer. Could you answer that one?
Certainly. So obviously, as we sort of explained earlier, this conservation easement is treed and there are other trees there. So we hadn't proposed anything thinking that it wasn't necessarily beneficial, but there are a number of areas that could be planted, including right along Fairfield Road. Within that first 50 feet, there's an opening. Again, that has trees in and around it, but there's certainly area there that could be planted, as well as areas towards the railroad on either side of the conservation easement. And we'd be more than happy to work with Mrs. Beam and Ms. Spiro to figure out where they would be most useful and what types of plantings should go there.
And so that it is abundantly clear, we do not want to ask this board for any variances that can be avoided. And that sounds like it might be a technical variance because of the existing conditions, but we make the commitment to the board that we will create a buffer in that area and that we'll do so to the satisfaction of your professionals. Mr. So I'm going to ask you to go to lighting. I think lighting will comply, but if you could just describe for the board's benefit the type of lighting and then confirm the steps that were taken to avoid any spillage off-site.
Right, and I do believe there might be one element of relief in Ms. Beam's review letter that we might not be able to avoid. But first, let me say this is all modern LED lighting. And we've worked hard to meet the ordinance. We want to meet the ordinance. It's all shielded. They're down directed lighting at the lowest temperature LED. It's all adjustable to be controlled in the overnight hours and limited. And I might ask when we get to it to Ms. Beam on the average piece. We want to meet the ordinance and we hope we can. I'm just not sure if exactly what the comment in her review letter was, whether it's something that can be met or not. But the intent is to meet the lighting ordinance.
Your fixtures are ordinance height is permitted by the ordinance. And can you confirm that your design has zero spillage off of the property?
There's definitely zero spillage off of the property with the use of shields. We've used 24-foot poles which is sort of a modest height for this type of use and helps us get a real down-directed light over some of the larger paved areas without having lights all over those parking areas.
I did ask you to identify the signs. I know that the ordinance contemplates that only one sign is permitted. And with our driveways 800 feet apart, we've asked to have a monument sign at each. If you could just identify for the board where those proposed monument signs are. The variance testimony will come at a later time this evening.
Right, and I would point out the frontage of this property is over 1,600 feet long. And the two driveways, as I mentioned before, are about 800 feet apart. You can, it's a little bit hard to distinguish from the landscaping in this colored rendering, but they're each angled on the inner island of the two driveways. So as you would come south on Fairfield Road, you would see the first one at the first driveway. The second one would be opposite the hot box as you were to turn into that driveway, the more southerly entry.
50 feet or more back, and 50 feet or more back, and not in the farmland buffer.
Mr. Pape, if I can just talk about the signage for 1 minute.
Really?
You're allowed to have one type of sign. One. You have 7. So are you expecting a lot of public to come to this site?
No, we're expecting close to 0 public to come to the site.
So I think that the sign package is excessive. I think that, yes, your driveways are far apart and you have a monument sign on each driveway. Why do you need a projecting address sign in addition to the 2 monument signs? I think it's just too much.
I think the best answer would be to say the following, that the guidance that you provide to us on signage will be important in a final determination. I'd be very comfortable this evening to state that this is a use variance and only a preliminary site plan. If the board were comfortable granting the relief that is requested, we could agree that no signage has been approved and that signage would be a necessary proof at the time of final. And that would give us the opportunity to work further with you. And if that's acceptable to the board, that would be the way I'd ask to proceed.
I would defer to the board, but I would advise very strongly that the size of the signs should be evaluated to comply with the requirements. And you have 7 signs proposed as part of this package and 1 is permitted. So I'm going to defer to the board on whether they're okay with deferring it to final, but I will tell you that it's a lot for a warehouse building where you're expecting nobody to come, like no member of the public to come here. So I would just leave it to the board to decide how they want to handle it.
Okay. Point made. We understand. And we would defer to the board, but we are prepared to remove the signage package and to work with you and come back with something that you find to be more appropriate for the intensity of the use.
Mr. Chair, if I could just touch on one of the items that Mr. Zugner provided testimony with regarding to the lighting. I will say our initial letter, we had some concerns about areas of the site that didn't have light. I'm satisfied that they've addressed that. They need a variance for exceeding the maximum average light intensity over the parking areas, which is 0.5 foot candles. I think they're in the 0.8 to 1.3 range, I want to say. This is not an atypical relief that's being requested of late. Obviously, with advance of LED lights, we're seeing this, and we've talked about this at numerous rules committees about changing that restriction, but they do still need relief from it. But I'm satisfied with the lighting, with the downward facing, the house side shields, and all the modifications that have been made.
Okay. My other question, okay, this is going to be a warehousing distribution type businesses. They're going to come in and then distribute it in their own trucks out to where the product's got to go, correct?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, it's a warehouse that is involved in the distribution of product. So product comes in in bulk. It is emptied into the building and it is repackaged and placed back onto trailers and then taken to the end users. That's
Okay.
exactly what it is.
It's not going to be like a blinds unlimited where you have a lot of public coming in to pick up blinds and, you know, that type of operation, correct?
No, there's no retail element at all. There's no public element at all. It also is not designed to be where auctions take place or
Okay.
it is strictly a warehouse for the distribution of product. The
Okay.
signage is intended to provide direction to the site. And I can't fault in any way Ms. Bing's comments.
Okay.
Okay. So having gone through those site elements, I'm going to ask Louis, my opening remarks to the board. I shared with them our clients' commitment to provide sanitary sewer facilities in the area. If you could, do you have an exhibit? Is there an additional exhibit that we can share with the board to give a sense of what type of sanitary sewer improvements Mr. Wong and his company are prepared to make in Howell Township?
I do have one. I hadn't sent it earlier. I'm going to send it right now. Hopefully that goes through quickly.
And while that's being sent, I'm going to ask that Mr. Zogner, I indicated that it's a 7,000 linear foot force main. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, it's 7,000 feet. It would head to Adelphia 524, and there is a significant interceptor with plenty of capacity at that road.
And I also would like you to share with the board, over the last 15 months, we have met Mr. Zogner and members of his professional team and other members of our professional team have met with William Nunziata, the township's utility engineer, and we have met with the Manasquan River Regional Sewerage Authority. We've met with their attorney, their in-house engineer, their consulting engineer, and their executive director, all for the purpose of confirming that we are talking about installing sanitary sewer in an area that is within the 208 area. 208 area meaning that portion of the state of New Jersey, the township of Howell, that is allowed to be serviced. Mr. Zogner, all of that you're going to present tonight to the board, all of this has been reviewed and I'm going to say vetted with both Mr. Nunziata and with the Manasquan River Regional Sewerage Authority. You can confirm your participation in those discussions.
That's correct. We've had quite a number of meetings and made great progress.
So if you could identify for all where our client's property is, and where the pump would be built, and then show us on this plan where the 7,000 linear feet of force main would be installed.
So you can see at the center of this plan's labeled Conceptual Sewer Exhibit, again with today's date. That's our proposed building. And near our southerly entry, we would have, beyond the building setback, we would have a pump station. This is really essentially like a fenced in little enclosure, but there would be a pump there. And that would obviously collect hours, but potentially other sites within the sewer service area in and around this commercial portion of Route 33 and Business 33. And what we had determined at this point was that we can collect that area through gravity to our site based on topography, and then pump that all the way down Fairfield Road until we reach 524, where it would connect into the regional interceptor.
So the 7,000 linear feet is the southern part going down on this picture all the way to 524.
Correct.
And
So,
on
Mr. Pape, sorry, I want to just clarify for the board. So the 7,000 linear feet, is that from the pump station on the site plan, or are you running it all the way to Route 33, or is that something future by others?
the answer is it's to our client's property. But I think the best way to answer that that question is for me to lead Mr. Zugner through a series of questions. So Mr. Zugner, would you confirm on the record that the 7,000 feet is from the pump to 524?
It is, yes.
And the commitment to is our client would get that, would seek that approval. He'd hire you to design it and gain all and proceed with the township, state, and regional sewage authority to build it.
Correct, yes.
And all of that you've been entrusted with. And then our client is agreed to be responsible for building it. There would be a request made to the sewage authorities for recapture so that as future people tie in, a proportionate reimbursement for the expenses would be requested. But Mr. Wong is prepared to do the outlay to build the entire system. There's also properties that are to the north of us. And if you could describe the red lines that are to the north of us, what those lines mean. And then there's a lot of pinkish purple printing on here. If you could describe what all that pinkish purple printing is about.
So we've identified in red 2 gravity legs, we'll call them, to collect commercial areas along 33 and 33 business. So the red line is showing gravity line that could make it to our pump station based on topography. And then the pink is identifying potential developed users and undeveloped users along that route so that we have both an idea of what properties are in the sewer service area and what kind of flow we would need to design for in terms of a pump station to gather that area.
And very important for the board to know, as we met with Mr. Nunziata and all of the representatives at the Manasquan River Regional Sewage Authority, they emphasized the importance of sizing the pump to accommodate all of these upstream properties. And they emphasized that the design must be at a certain depth so as to receive all these properties through a gravity flow. And if you could just briefly, without teaching us how to design sewer systems, describe that you've done that.
Yes, we have. We've spent a great deal of time with them and are confident in where we stand in terms of planning this out.
So we're not offering, to Mr. Chair and board members, we're not offering to build or even seek approvals for any of the portion north of the pump, but we are confirming that our pump and the force main will be designed to accommodate all of those future, all those potential future users along the 33 corridor.
Okay, Mr. Pape, I got a couple of questions on that. Okay, well, I see the red lines, which is proposed gravity fed. Will those be able to, at some time in the future, will that pump station be designed to handle force mains outside that area into that gravity fed to this pump station? Like I'm saying, if say the housing development that's back in north of the site across 33 off of Brickyard back there, say they wanted to go get in to sewer there, is this system going to be designed to handle that
Mr.
sewer, or is it just in the purple?
It's the 33 corridor that we had discussed with both Mr. Nunziata and with the Manasquan River Regional Sewage Authority. It would be designed to accommodate those. It's worth noting that in the future, if there was a new, larger users, there's always the possibility of changing the pump on our pump or changing the dimensions of the well below the pump. It can be engineered. The force main has a very, very substantial capacity for growth, but the pump and the well could be changed.
That's all. That answers my question. It's going to be designed in a way that it could be expanded in the future.
Well, pump stations are designed that way. Yes, sir.
Okay.
You can. I mean, it's always it's inappropriate, and I will not do something that's inappropriate. It's inappropriate to talk about the dollars and cents, but a pump station and a 7,000 linear foot force main.
Oh, I know that pump station alone is gonna be
Yes.
a pretty high dollar figure, but I know we don't discuss it too much here. But I know the costs of it, so.
It's a major commitment, and one that Mr. Wong has taken and with his eyes wide open.
Yes, sir.
That commitment was made. I have no further direct examination of Mr. Zugner. Grateful for him coming so prepared. He's now available to the board's professionals, and the public, if you choose, for your examination.
Okay. Mr. Charlie, you want to start off and
Yep.
you want to go through your letters?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, can I just bring up real quick a housekeeping thing in case this isn't marked? Do we have to mark this?
Yeah, that's.
Oh, okay.
Oh, thank you.
There you go. 8:20, 8:30,
8:30.
8:30. I'm sorry, 8:29. I already have it pre-marked as 8:29.
Yeah, 8:29.
So, Louis, give it a name.
This has a title on it of Conceptual Sewer Exhibit and has today's date.
Mr. Zugner is available to you for examination.
Hey, Charlie, you want to start off?
Yes. So if I could just kind of circle back to the stormwater management, that was a big piece of my original review letter, which the applicant and their team has addressed a large chunk of it. I just want to clarify, we talked about the conservation easement at the southeast corner of the property. That's the start of the Ardena Brook. So it's a stream corridor there. Their plan shows the 100-foot stream corridor and the additional 100-foot stream corridor buffer on top of that. So it's a total 200-foot. The applicant and their professional team listened to some of the comments and suggestions that we had. The original basin layout was partially within the stream corridor and stream corridor buffer. They've completely relocated the basin itself, so it's not within the stream corridor or the buffer. I will say though, their stormwater outfall, their two outfalls are within the buffer and the corridor, which in my eyes, I take no issue with that because they do need to tie into the existing drainage that goes through the conservation easement into the wetlands area there. The closer that connection point can be made, I think is obviously preferred from our perspective. So I take no issue with that.
Charlie, real quick, will they need relief if they have to do new construction in that conservation?
No, so just to reiterate, they're not proposing any construction within the conservation easement.
Right.
The disturbance for the two outfalls is just within the stream corridor and stream corridor buffer outside of the conservation easement. So
Okay.
it's
Thank
just
you.
relief of our township ordinance, not anything beyond that.
Okay.
Yeah, they need a variance for that.
Yep. They do need relief. There's off-street loading in the front yard area. Obviously, the building on the west and the east side, they have their main loading areas, the concrete for their trailers to come in there and load and unload from the building. That requires relief. I think Mr. Zugner provided some testimony about how they're going to supplement the landscaping there. I assume Ms. Cafone's going to talk about that too. The hot box, I don't take issue with that. I know there are restrictions on how far away from the road that can be. They moved it outside of the farmland buffer. I don't take issue with that. The stormwater management, there's still some additional things that I think just need a little bit more clarification and reworking in the report. What I would say to the board and to the chairman is, should the calculations say that the basin needs to be increased a little bit, or maybe there's some roof leaders that need to go into a drywall or recharge, as long as it doesn't impact any buffers or anything like that, I would think that that's something that can be worked out between Mr. Zugner and my office as a condition of the approval. They're fairly close. I think that, just some, got to cross the T's and dot the I's on that, but I'm pretty comfortable with where they're at on that. As far as the sanitary sewer, Mr. Zugner, is that all going to be directional drilled? Is any of that trench, or how's that getting installed?
I don't know that we can completely answer that at this point, other than to say initially we would love to directional drill as much as we could.
Okay. So what I would say, obviously 7,000 feet is a pretty long stretch, and depending on depth, if it's going to be within the roadway, the township does have a road opening ordinance, which requires, resurfacing of the pavement. What I would say is, that's something that can be revisited once the final design and everything has been finalized for the final approval. Should the board rule favorably, I would say across the property frontage and up to Route 33, there is some distress in the existing pavement of the roadway there. It would be my recommendation for the board that maybe we want to consider, some possible roadway resurfacing along with the shoulder widening that they're proposing. They are adding significant truck traffic to that roadway stretch. And then when Mr. Ray obviously gets in there with the traffic testimony, I think they are restricting truck turns out of the site heading north on Route 33. So maybe that's something that can address any, concerns with the pavement condition. And that's the bulk of what I have. A lot of it is just coming down to traffic and operation. Any more details we can get on the, expected tenants and hours of operations. And I guess Mr. Wong or maybe Mr. Cafone will touch on that.
Mr. Cunliffe, the resurfacing the roadway across the front of our property and towards the intersection, I think what milling and doing an overlay, that's an acceptable condition. And we do intend, and now is a good time to say it, we do intend to through signage, to direct all truck traffic exiting the site to make left turns to go to the 33 interchange and to prohibit truck traffic from making right turns and going down to Fairfield towards 524. So.
Any more, Charlie?
Yeah, just two last quick things. So, and obviously the township repealed their mandatory requirement to make contribution to the sidewalk trust fund. They still do need the waiver relief for sidewalk along the frontage and then also private sidewalk from the site to that public sidewalk. Looking at the adjacent properties, there's no sidewalks in the area. Obviously they're curbing the frontage, which I think is going to be an improvement. I take no exception to the granting of that relief.
We might not be putting money in a sidewalk fund, but there's an awful lot of money going into curbs, road widening, and road resurfacing. I ask that all be mindful of that contribution offer.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to, my original letter probably said something about it, Kate, and it can, and it's since been repealed. So I just wanted to clarify that for the board.
Thank you.
Is that it, Charlie?
From an engineering perspective, that's it for right now.
Okay. Jennifer?
I think Charlie covered pretty much all of the items. I don't remember, Lou, did you talk about the trash compactors?
No.
That are located in the parking lot and how they're going to function, and are they screened? Are they movable? How does that work?
Ms. Beam, with permission, when our architect is up, he has testimony on that point. I think it'll address the concern. Okay,
so to that end, is he going to testify about recycling as well, or just the trash compactors?
Well, the trash compactors and the recycling will be inside the building in a bay. So that's what the testimony will be. There'll be nothing that's out on the ground.
I cannot hear you at all.
Really?
Literally, all I hear is like Charlie Brown's teacher.
I'm so sorry. I'm 6 inches away from the microphone. Mr. Radasti, when he testifies, is going to identify that the trash compactors will be inside the building, as will be the recycling. It will not be out on the surface.
Okay, now is he going to testify about how trash is actually going to be like picked up, or is he just talking about the compactors?
He's ready to talk about how these compactors. Yes, he'll take us through it. Hopefully to your satisfaction.
Okie doke. So we talked about the relief that's necessary for the buffer You've deferred the signage. We talked about lighting and the loading and the sidewalks. I guess, are we gonna have any testimony on, operations, hours, those types of things?
We did not intend to do testimony on operation other than to say it's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week operation. These facilities most often, have an intense period of operation during the business day and a skeleton activity overnight. But the facility would be operational as all distribution centers are 24/7.
But you don't have tenants, right?
We do not have tenants. We intentionally stayed away from the marketplace until such time as this board acts. We would not be comfortable going into the marketplace, identifying anything. We stayed away from the marketplace.
And then I guess, I don't know, I guess this is a question for the architect as well. We see the plans have 4 office, 2,400 square foot offices, 1 in each corner. Are we anticipating that the maximum split of the building is going to be for 4 tenants?
Yes, in my opening remarks, I indicated that this building was designed to accommodate 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 tenants. We're anticipating and we're willing to commit that this will be a 1, 2, 3, or 4 tenanted building.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have.
So, Mr. Chair, if I could just jump back in, because there was testimony about the hours of operation, 24 hours. So the lighting, is that going to be at full blare for 24 hours? Is there going to be dimming after a certain time at night?
We would be very comfortable working with your professionals and your police department to have a dimming program. The number of truck movements that takes place after hours is minimal. This is not a type of facility that goes around the clock.
But you can't really say that for sure because you don't have a tenant, right?
Yeah, well, no, you can never say it for certain until the tenant is in place. But the nature of the tenant is warehouse and distribution, which is not a 24/7 operation typically.
I'm sorry. First you said it is 24/7 and now you're saying it's not typically 24/7?
No, the intensity, the overnight is typically skeletal was the word that I used. You have activity, but you don't have a lot of movement during the overnight.
Okay.
And Steve Radasti just sent me a text and he corrected me. So I better correct myself on the record. And he'll describe the compactors. The compactors are outside of the building. The compactors are on the ground and we'll talk about them. It is the recycling that's inside the building. I apologize for that misstatement. When Mr. Radasti's up, he'll take us through those proofs.
Any more, Jen?
No, not for this witness.
Okay, Ms. Shapiro.
Hi. Yeah, I saw, well, earlier Ken mentioned that you still had a few of my items, which I'm assuming the items in my letter are fine to add. I mentioned a few open gaps in the woods, which you did touch on. So as long as you guys are fine with that, I have some also species changes, minor. I did want to mention you discussed the buffer before that you'll need a variance for, but the plan that you pulled up before doesn't show the additional plantings that you are proposing there, correct?
That's correct, Mrs. Spiro.
Okay, so yeah, so I don't know if the board noticed, but at the, I don't have the plan up, the south. Yeah, the south end of the site, there's additional plantings that are put in the area of the buffer to fill in some gaps.
I think you're referring to a buffer against a residence that's all the way south of our site?
Yeah.
Correct.
Right, you couldn't see it on that color rendering that you had put up.
Right. But yes, we definitely will comply with all the comments in your letter, both on species and additional plantings.
Okay, yeah, I mean, the biggest issue on this site is we're gonna be landscaping, based on field conditions, so, which is good, because the existing buffer that's currently there, established from plantings a few years back, so they have a nice start already.
Okay. Any more? Hey, Mr. Roscoe, any questions or comments for this witness? Okay. Mr. Cantor,
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
yes, sir.
In listening, my concern is the traffic, which was addressed a little bit, the traffic from Route 33 going into the warehouse. Will there be a special lane or shoulder that goes right from Route 33 to the entrances? And then there are two entrances to the facility, it looks like, one at the northern end and one at the southern end. So will the shoulder be able to accommodate going to the facility both sides?
Mr. Zugner, I think that maybe you and maybe Charlie too, but if you could describe the road improvement.
So there obviously will be more testimony specifically to traffic, but what we have proposed is widening of the shoulder along our frontage, not the creation of a new or second lane along Fairfield Road.
All right, that's a 2-lane road if I'm not mistaken. Pretty much like it's not a major road. It's a local 2-lane road. So the addition of truck traffic is going to really stress that area, particularly getting on and off of 33, in my opinion. And the other thought I would have too is that you don't really know the tenants yet, to Ms. Beam's point, but any good warehouse facility in the year 2020 would be 24 hours. And they're going to look to maximize the capacity and the operation of that facility. So I think we should anticipate 24 hours worth of operation realistically, so we don't get any surprises. And then, yeah, the only other thing I had was on the signs that was mentioned, but maybe you could bring it up. There are only 2 entrances, so I was wondering why 7 signs were called for.
There were signs on the building, Mr. Cantor, but we'll take the whole sign package back and go work with Ms. Beam before coming back to you.
Okay, and then you probably would need signs inside the facility to direct the trucks to the particular places that they need to get to.
I'm sure there's traffic directional signs too.
Thank you, Mr. Pape.
Okay. Mr. Martin,
Yeah, Mr. Cantor pretty much asked the questions I had. I was just want to make sure that the truck traffic was going to be diverted right to Route 33 on the exit, as you stated. There would be no traffic going the other direction, right?
There would be car traffic. Employees would be allowed to return home making a right turn, but no truck traffic would be.
That's not a problem. I'm just talking about the trucks.
Truck traffic would be exclusively coming out and going to 33.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
okay, Mr. Moretti,
The only question I had, Mr. Cantor answered, was about the signs. How are they going to identify the people that are in the building? And so we're going to address that later with Jen, I think. Okay, that's it.
okay, thank you. Mr. Hughes,
I'm good, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
okay. Okay, Mr. Pape, Eileen, do you want to open this up to public for questions or comments of this witness, or how do you want to handle this? Ron, how do you think we ought to handle?
You're the chairman, whatever you want.
Can I throw a vote in for a break?
Yeah, we will, but I want to get
Right.
done with this witness first.
Mr. Chairman, I would recommend that, of course, comments would be at the end. Let's open up to the public after each witness. This way that witness is direct examined and cross-examined and then resolved. Mr.
Right.
Pape, okay with that?
I like that very much. Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Frankel.
Can I have a motion to open to public for questions only?
I'll make a motion to open the public, Mr. Chair.
Motion by Mr. Hughes. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Mertens. All in favor?
Aye.
Everybody, do your thumb. Aye.
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 Okay, good.
Aye, aye, Captain.
Okay, a lot of them were muted, so I wanted to make sure covered. Okay, at this time, we'll take questions from the public.
If anyone, any member of the public wishes to ask questions of this witness, please use the raise your hand feature and we will bring you into the meeting one at a time. Thank you. We're going to bring in Thomas Cohen right now.
All witnesses will need to be sworn, of course, so let me know when he is unmuted and we will swear in Mr. Cohen.
Mr. Cohen, if you have video too, the new rules require that we see video. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cohen, would you raise your right hand, please? You swear the testimony you give tonight will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
That I do.
May we have your name, please?
Thomas J. Cohen.
Okay. You may-
Nice to see you, Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate that, sir.
Go ahead, Tom.
I just have a couple questions for Mr. Zucker on the MAC property, Block 177, 8.01 across the street. With regard to the map, I believe it's classified as A29. Mr. Zucker, you don't have that listed in purple as a possible development property. I was wondering why that was.
I'm just looking briefly here. I don't think that we have,
Which property is it, sir?
Yeah, that would, right where it says proposed sewer service area.
right.
That's 393 Fairfield Road, block 811, I'm sorry, 177, 8.01. So you don't show that in purple as a possible development site. I was just wondering if the calculations for sewer were in your numbers for that property.
So what I would say is it is within our blue identified properties. I'd have to go back through my list to see whether we gave that a flow number or not. And if not, then we should incorporate that.
Oh, that'd be great. And the red line that you reflect from Route 33 through that property, is that a gravity fed line?
So at this point, there's a couple of conceptual routes for us to get to Route 33. And that is one that obviously would require easements, is the most direct route as being a gravity route, and is a potential.
Okay, so it would operate based on the elevations for a gravity feed through there.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mr.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Okay, is there somebody else? Is that all, Mr. Cohen? Okay, you're muted.
Yes, sir. That's all I have right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Eileen, is there anybody else?
Are there any other members of the public wishing to ask questions of Mr. Zugner? If so, please raise your hand. I'm not seeing any other hands raised.
Whenever you say that, it reminds me of a peanut cartoon. You know, somebody holler at, hey, I'm over here. Anyway, okay.
I thought you were going to say it reminds you of school.
Well, this is school nowadays.
Yes.
So, okay, at this time, not seeing anybody else from the public, can I have a motion to close public questions?
So moved.
Who moved that?
Cantor.
Mr. Cantor. Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second that, sir.
Seconded by Mr. Hughes. All in favor, thumbs up.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Okay, everybody was unmuted. Okay, Mr. Pape, at this time, can we take about a 10-minute break here? And then we'll move right into the next witness.
Surely, our next witness will be Mr. Radasti, but we're all ready to take that break too, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and I want to remind the public, they will have a chance to make their comments at the end of the the testimony that's placed on the record here. So, okay, Eileen, we're going to take a 10-minute break.
Thank you. The board will now recess for 10 minutes.
Hey, Eileen, you want to call us back?
The zoning board will now reconvene.
Okay, Mr. Pape, where you left off, you were going to call your next witness.
Yes, thank you. Our next witness is Mr. Steve Radasti, our architect. Mr. Radasti has been sworn, and with your permission, we'll begin with Mr. Radasti taking a few moments to share his education and professional background for the record tonight.
Hey, Mr. Radasti.
Yes, hi. I'm Steve Radasti. I'm a licensed registered architect in the state of New Jersey. I graduated New Jersey Institute of Technology in 1992 with a Bachelor of Architecture, and I became licensed in the state of New Jersey in 1996. I'm a principal at Perez and Radasti Associates, located in Cranberry, New Jersey. I've been, my license is current, and I presented in front of dozens of boards throughout the state, including Howell Township.
Yes, we accept your credentials, sir.
Thank you.
Would you take a few moments and just, actually, I think we are going to need your building elevation to be in front of the board as you're testifying. Ms. Rubano, is that available? Terrific.
Oh, perfect, perfect. Okay, so
if you could describe the building to the board members, and early on, I'd like you to share with the board that you're mindful of the zoning, of the architectural requirements for in Howell Township and how you propose to address those.
Yes, so I'm familiar with the Township Code, Article 25, non-residential design standards. As I've designed other projects in town, such as the proposed New Jersey natural gas training facility that's being constructed across the street. I've also done the 3G Goldmont retail and office buildings on Route 9, the Fish Grill restaurant, as well as the Cartech auto auction building, and as well as some other buildings. We took this into account while designing this building. I'd like to start a little, so the building is 425 feet by 866 feet. The total building is 368,050 square feet, with the warehouse being 358,450 square feet, and a potential for up to 4 offices in the structure of 9,600 square feet. The building will be constructed of a tilt-up concrete construction with 4 different colors to add visual interest to the building. So at the corners of the building, so the space could be constructed with anywhere between 1, 2, 3, or 4 tenants. But assuming the most case, we have in each corner there would be an office space. So we wanted to accentuate the corners of the building, which would be the entrance to those office spaces. So we have this by a metal awning structure that projects out from the building 4 more feet, comes out of the ground, comes up horizontally over to the entrance and rounds the corner. And that draws attention to the corner where the office spaces would be. And there would be large openings for glass. And this would wrap the corner in the 4 corners. Directly above that, we would have a series of clear story windows that would be up high. And then along the bottom of the building, we would have a water table. And these would all be done with different colors of concrete to add visual interest and break up the facades. So we'd have a colored concrete water table, that same color being in part of the corner area, as well as a darker color. And then near the top of the building, we'd have a decorative band that the clear story windows would be located in. The facades of the building would also be broken up On the east elevation with pilasters, true pilasters that would be 3 feet by 5 feet, protruding 3 feet from the building and 5 feet in width, to add vertical elements to break up that elevation. As they traveled around the building, we would have the same look, but they wouldn't be actual pilasters. They would be the same dark color that would give it the illusion of the same pilasters.
Okay, excuse me. I'm very familiar with tilt wall, but the pilasters that you just stated, what will that be made of? The ones that you're talking about.
The pilasters would either be made with concrete, or they would be made with block and covered with a finish to match the concrete.
Okay, and then the highlights up top, are they going to be recessed or are they going to be flat?
Yes. So at the top of those pilasters, we have a recess in the parapet to break up the long linear lines of the building and add some visual interest. And we have that at each pilaster. And
okay,
then
now, the band itself with the 3 clear light windows.
Yes.
Now, is that going to be recessed or is that going to be flush mount?
So the windows would be recessed to add some shadow lines to it, and then to mimic that, where we wouldn't have actual windows, is we have faux windows that follow the same pattern. So we break the building up along this 50-foot grid, and we break it up between the pilasters, and some of them would have full clear story windows to mimic the look and proportion of the clear story windows. So the clear story windows would be in all the corners of the building to add natural light above the office area where there wouldn't be any high storage in those areas. So what we're doing is breaking up the facade with vertical elements, with these pilasters, cuts in the parapet to break up that line, a horizontal water table along the bottom of the building, as well as a horizontal band with the clear story windows at the top.
Now the horizontal band, is that going to be recessed or is it going to be flat?
The horizontal band would be a change in color and possibly a slight recess in the material itself.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then at the corners of the building, we would have the water table would travel horizontally, and when it gets to the corner, it kind of rises up and wraps around the corner. So this basically gives hierarchy to the entrance of the potential for spaces. These materials and finishes would wrap all the way around the building. We tried to spend a good amount of time adding visual interest to the top portion of the building, because the lower portion of the building along the east elevation, Fairfield Road, would be screened with landscaping. But we wanted to have a lot of visual interest at the top of the walls versus some warehouses that there's not a lot going on up there. This way, this shows up above the landscaping, as well as seeing the breaks in the roof above the landscaping, which we think would make the facades interesting.
I'm going to ask if you could just, you briefly touched on the roof line, if you could just point out the interest that you've created in the roof line.
Yes. So on the roof line, we would have the concrete parapet with various different colors, and then every so often on the grid lines, we would have it recede down above the pilasters, and we have this travel around the entire building. And this way, the top of the building would look interesting and would have some nice shadow lines with the pilasters, the vertical pilasters, and the interest would be that the pilasters come out, and at the same time, the parapet cuts down in the same location. So it adds a little bit of interest to it.
If you could briefly describe the choice of colors and how certain colors are for accent purposes and other colors are intended to be a more neutral, natural system?
Yes. The accents we have this. I guess I could say it's like a burgundy or a wine color around the metal canopies that accents this front entries above the four corners. And this comes out, like I said, comes out of the ground, wraps horizontally, and then wraps around and goes back down. So we use this wine color there, as well as canopy roofs throughout the building. At the pilasters, we used a darker gray color to give a little illusion to it. In some cases, it was, they're true pilasters. In other areas, we wanted to, break up the light colors with dark colors to give a little illusion of a little more depth that we would have there. Then we have a lighter band where the clear story windows would be. And then we have a medium tone, almost like a khaki color for the main portions of the building.
Mr. Pate, real quick, I'm looking at the elevations. Now, the mechanical equipment, your air conditioning, heat, this and that, is that going to be on top of the roof base?
Yes, that's correct. So any mechanical equipment that there would be on top of the building itself, and it should be screened by the parapet. If for some reason something wasn't screened by the parapet, we would provide screening for it.
Okay. And Mr. Adasti, I want to talk about your meeting with Fire Chief Lewis and those elements that he wanted to see you incorporate into the building. If you could just describe that you did, if you could confirm that you met with him, and if you could identify the guidance that he gave to you as to the building design.
Yes, I met with Fire Chief Lewis, and it was very, very helpful. We did add some notes on this sheet and the upper left-hand corner to address some of the items that are requested, such as a radio repeater system, that the building would be fully sprinklered, and that we'd also have a fire alarm system. And these notes are located in the upper left-hand corner of the sheet.
Yes, and for the members of the board, Mr. Chief Lewis had a lot of information, and he pointed out that warehouse buildings, sometimes when there are firefighters inside the building, they lose contact with the firefighters outside of the building, and that there is something called a repeater system that, if it was installed in the building, would ensure that that condition would not be present. So we're here to stipulate that the repeater system, as requested by Fire Chief Lewis, is in the notes and is a commitment to this board and to the town. Then I'm going to ask if we could just briefly talk about the trash, the compactors, and also the recyclable, the way that you have shown it on the plan.
Yes. So we designed the building so that it could be broken down into up to 4 different tenant spaces. So the building has near the 4 corners on the east and west elevations, we have a ramp for ramp loading into the building, which could be used for forklifts and manual loading. And directly next to that would be an overhead bay where we would have a self-contained compactor at the exterior of the building. This compactor would be self-contained, a 30-yard compactor that once the compactor is full, it would be taken away and a new unit would be brought to the site. It kind of looks like a it's self-contained, so it kind of looks like the back of a truck without the tractor. It has a small platform and hopper that faces against the building, and then it has a 30-yard container beyond that. This would be partially screened by the ramp. From the opening, it would be adjacent to the ramp. And there would be a total of 4 of these. The recycling itself would be located inside the building, and we would have a cardboard balers in the building. And when the recycling is full, a truck would come to take away the recycling, which would be baled inside.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I have no further direct examination of Mr. Radasti. There was a signage element to his plans. We do not ask the board to consider the signage element. We respectfully request the opportunity to work with Ms. Beam on the signage element. And if we are fortunate enough to return to this board for final approval, we'll have a signage plan at that time.
Hey, Mr. Pape, what is the overall height as it sits without screening up top?
Mr. Radasti, the building height, please.
The overall height of the building from the average elevation is 45 feet.
Okay. And if there is screening, would there need to be a variance for the screening at that time?
Well, any mechanical equipment on the roof, I would hope be able to fit behind the parapet. Until the actual HVAC equipment is designed, not completely sure. So if for some reason it didn't, we've provided screening in the past attached to the units that would be the same color as the building facades itself.
Okay. So it wouldn't require height variance, correct?
I would defer to your professionals. I think those are ancillary structures. I'm not certain.
Okay.
They're not exempted from height. If you have a structure that's on the roof screening them, what we typically exempt out are, spires, those types of things. So, perhaps this is something that you want to take a harder look at before you come back for final.
And I also, Mr. Radasti, I think it's important to point out that the mechanicals are not located near the perimeter of the building, that they're located centrally on the roof. If you could just share that point with the board.
Yes, that's correct. They wouldn't be at the perimeter itself. They would be set back from the front facade. And that's one of the reasons why. I guess it depends on viewing angle. The building's very deep. And we don't know who the tenants are yet, but I would assume that most tenants would not need that much equipment on the roof.
So, Mr. Chair, if I could just give some perspective on it too. So it's a 45-foot high building with all the mechanicals in the center of it. The grade of the site from the road is also elevated from the road, by six or 7 feet from the road. So, I mean, someone standing or driving in a car on Fairfield Road, it might not be readily apparent, if it's condensed towards the center. So just for Mr. Radasti, so I had kind of asked in my review letter, I don't know if it was the Mr. Zigner's office responded to it. They said that the warehouse space wasn't going to be HVAC in there, or it is going to have HVAC?
Well, I would assume at this time that the warehouse wouldn't have air conditioning. However, the office space itself probably would have air conditioning.
Is there ability to put that like at grade around the building and screen it and not have it up there, and maybe it's not even an item of concern or for the height?
Well, if the air conditioning is only for the offices are only 2,400 square feet apiece. So a rooftop unit for those would be relatively small.
Okay.
So I believe that could be on the roof without being seen. I mean, 2,400 square feet is the size of a house.
Mm-hmm.
So the units are relatively small.
Well, Charlie, real quick, what is the height requirement? What's the minimum height?
You mean the maximum height? That is a good question. I need to check that up. I think it's 45 feet in the zone, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, see, that's what I was
It
saying.
is 45 feet.
Yeah, and the only exemptions, like Jen said, are spires and things like that. Elevator shafts are exempted, but I don't believe building mechanicals and screening are exempted from that.
Right.
They're not.
That's why I'm bringing this up, because if it is 45 feet, that's our maximum height now. And then if you have to screen 2 feet above or say even 5 feet above, now you need a height variance.
I think that I can make everyone's job easier. We will stipulate that we will accommodate the mechanicals without a height variance screening. If that issue arises, Mr. Radasti, I'm going to ask that you confirm that those units will be then placed down on the ground and properly screened.
Yes, that is correct. We'll do that.
Okay. Okay. Charlie, do you have any further questions before I turn it over to Jim?
Nothing further, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Jennifer.
So first, can I just ask, what is the height of the water table?
The height of the water table, from the is about 5.5 feet from the grade, but then where it drops down another 4 feet for loading.
Like the reason I'm asking it is if you look at I mean, it's hard to see on the east elevation because, especially here, because we're so zoomed out and there's so many loading bays, but
you might be able to see in the detail. Okay, this works. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, is there any way we can widen that up a little bit? Because I appreciate what you're trying to do with the band along the top and the windows, and then the water table the best you can with all of those loading bays, but there's still like a lot of area between that water table and that band that's kind of blank. Right. And I know like I don't want you to put windows or anything like that because that kind of defeats the purpose of the building, but is there any way we can maybe widen those bands up a little bit to kind of reduce the blankness a little bit?
Sure. So you say, and I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood. The band at the water table or the band at the clear story?
Either one, honestly, to just kind of shorten the distance between the two would be, I don't know which, I don't really care either one, but if we can just reduce that distance, I think that would be a better aesthetic. I mean, honestly, you're not really going to see that water table from Fairfield Road because of the berming and the landscaping. So it might be better to widen the band along the top but either way, just to reduce the distance between the two.
Yes, we could do that.
And I have to say, I mean, listen, it's a warehouse, so I'm not expecting it to be, that gorgeous, but I do think you did a good job in trying to address the issues in the design standards and still maintain the functionality of the building. So, I think if you can look at that before you come back for final, if the board acts affirmatively tonight, hopefully, that would be great. Okay. And then the only other thing, the concern that I have is the screening of the trash compactors. You said they're partially screened by the ramps, but wouldn't that be if you're looking at it from the side? I mean, the Fairfield Road elevation, you're kind of looking at it. So I'm not sure how that would be screened.
Well, the openings in the driveway would be coming from the ramp side. So I guess you could, where there's landscaping along Fairfield Road.
Right.
So our thought was that the ramp was blocking it from where you would see in through the driveway, but the landscaping itself would be screening it from the road.
So the only concern I have about it is the visibility of those trash compactors as you're driving down the road. So what I would ask is maybe when you come back for final, if we can have kind of like a view shed from the driveways to show that they're adequately screened so that you're not going to see them as you're driving by. Because I do think that with the berming and the landscaping, and obviously as the landscaping matures over time, it'll be even more of a screen, but I just want to make sure that those two openings, you're not looking into a trash compactor.
Yes, we could do that, definitely.
Yeah, real quick, I've got a question on that. I'm very familiar with the compactors. They're roughly 8 foot tall. So, you're talking an 8 foot, now is this going to be fed directly off of the finished floor through a bed into it, or do you have to go outside to feed this trash compactor?
The overhead door would be open and the compactor would be, there'd be a landing and a hopper at that overhead door.
Okay, so you're gonna be at the elevation of finished floor
Which is
with
right.
the hopper, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you're whatever the elevation of that finished floor is gonna carry through to the end of that trash compactor. So, you know, that compactor is the box on that is 8 foot. You know, most of them are 6 to 8 feet tall.
Right. Okay. Okay. So what we'll do is we could address that with a rendering and see what we could do to screen that.
Okay.
Chairman?
Okay. Jen, I'm sorry to interrupt there.
No, those were really the only two comments that I had.
Okay.
You know, but again, I do want to reiterate, you know, take a hard look at the HVAC equipment, because if you require those structures on the roof, you know, additional relief would be necessary.
Okay. No, we will take a look at that, and I appreciate letting me know that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Yes, sir, Mr. Cantor.
if there are 4 tenants, would that not require 4 trash facilities?
Correct.
That's correct.
They stated on the plan that there are 4 trash compactors, but you know, I'm sure that if there's only one tenant there would only be 1 trash compactor, if I'm not mistaken.
That's a correct statement. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
1 per tenant.
Right. Okay. Sherry, I would ask you, but I don't think you have any technical questions on this, so with the architect. What about the plantings on the foundation? Did that all meet your satisfaction? Foundation plantings?
Yeah, I know I commented something on the species, but I don't think they were the ones in the foundation. So yeah, I didn't have any issues with any of those. They're all typical, you know, building foundation plantings.
Okay. Charlie, any further? Okay. Mr. Cantor, you have any further questions?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Hughes,
I'm good to go, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Mertens. Mr. Martin? You're muted.
No questions at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Moretti?
No questions at this time.
Mr. Roscoe?
No question, sir.
Okay, Mr. Pate, it looks like we've questioned your witness here.
Do you wish to open it to the public?
Yeah, that was my next question.
Thank you.
Okay, do I have a motion to open to public for questions of this witness?
I'll make a motion to open the public, sir.
Motion by Mr. Hughes. Do I have a
I'll
second?
second.
Who was that?
Rich Mertens.
Merton, Mr. Mertens, second?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Eileen, you're up.
The chairman has opened the meeting up for members of the public that would like to ask questions of Mr. Radasti, the architect. If you would like to ask questions at this time, please use the raise your hand feature and we will move you into the meeting. Once again, if anyone has questions of the architect, please use the raise your hand feature. If not, the chairman will close the public portion for this witness and we will move on. And I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Okay. Can I have a motion to close public?
Motion to close, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Mr. Mertens,
Second.
second by Mr. Roscoe. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, all opposed. Okay, Mr. Pate.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the board, the next witness to testify is John Ray. John is a traffic expert and a traffic consultant. The testimony that I intend to request Mr. Ray to place on the record is going to be initially to describe that contact was made with the DOT to confirm that the 33 interchange will accept truck traffic. It does now. There's 6 or 7 warehouses on Fairfield now, so there is a truck traffic pattern, but I'm going to ask that he confirm that. And then I'm going to ask that he confirm the safety of the design of the 2 driveways. And then because it's been testified to by Mr. Zugner, and we've also shared with you the fire department's comments, I'm going to ask if he just briefly describes the adequacy of the on-site circulation. So with that, Mr. Ray, who has been sworn, could share with you his professional and educational background. We'll go right to those points.
Mr. Ray.
Good evening. My name is John Ray, R-E-A. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey, a principal with McDonough & Ray Associates, traffic engineering consultants located in Manasquan, New Jersey. In addition to being a licensed professional engineer in the state, I also have 2 engineering degrees, a civil engineering degree, a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from NJIT, and a master's in Transportation Engineering and Planning from NYU. And I've testified before many planning and zoning boards, including this board, over the years, but it's been some time.
We accept your credentials and welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Ray, as the hour is getting late, I'm going to ask if you could be succinct.
It usually is when the traffic engineer is up.
If we could be succinct. So we've asked a long time ago, more than a year ago, we asked that you and your team go down to the Department of Transportation on a pre-application meeting to confirm that the Route 33 interchange with Fairfield Road does and can accept truck traffic. Can you just briefly confirm that those steps were taken?
Yeah, those steps were taken. A pre-application meeting was held in June of 2020 with the NJDOT, and we identified 2 improvements that were necessary in order to accommodate the truck traffic that would be generated by this facility. I'll go over those in short detail. The first improvement that was necessary was a radius increase on the eastbound Route 33 business off-ramp to Fairfield Road. We need to increase that inside radius to 50 feet to accommodate the WB67 trucks that might be generated by this facility. And that was discussed with DOT. It was generally agreed on, subject to us preparing full engineering plans. The second improvement was pulling back. There's a median on Fairfield Road just in advance of the signalized intersection at Route 33, at Business Route 33. And in order for a westbound truck on Business Route 33, in order to negotiate the left turn onto Fairfield Road, that concrete island on Fairfield Road will have to be pulled back approximately 20 feet in order to accommodate the turning radius. Again, this was discussed with DOT, conceptually agreed on, subject to us coming back with fully engineered plans. So we have met with DOT. We've identified those 2 improvements that are necessary, and the applicant will fund those improvements subject to him getting an approval from the township.
Right. And Mr. Chair, members of the board, my way of stating that would be as a condition of any relief that this board felt comfortable granting to the applicant, we would agree that we would secure the formal DOT approval and implement DOT improvements as directed.
Mr. Ray, what is the level of service there? Did you do any type of?
Yes, and that wasn't in the outline that Ken prepared for me, but we did do a full traffic impact study dated December 4th, 2019. And there's also a response letter to Mr. Cunliffe's first engineering review, which is dated March 23rd, 2020. And I can tell you, Mr. Nansen, we conducted traffic counts at the signalized intersection of Business Route 33 and Fairfield Road, as well as the eastbound off-ramp from the freeway to Fairfield Road. We calculated the level of service for those 2 intersections and the site driveways. And we also included the traffic from the NJNG training facility, which is under construction on the east side of Fairfield Road, approximately opposite our site, but up a little bit closer to Route 33. We did that traffic study as well. I believe that was in front of the planning board, and we included that traffic in the analysis. And I'm happy to tell you that all of the intersections that we studied will operate at level of service B during both the morning and afternoon peak hours.
Level
so there is
B?
capacity for this. B as in boy.
Okay,
Yes.
cool. Okay.
Ray, if you could confirm that our driveways as proposed enter the road where it is straight and flat, and that the locations of the driveways that have been chosen are safe and adequate for this facility.
Yes, the alignment and the horizontal and vertical alignment of Fairfield Road in the vicinity of the site is level and straight. So the site distances from both of the driveways are excellent, extend well beyond what is necessary for safe movement onto and off the site.
On site, we need to handle WB 67. We need to be able to handle trash removal vehicles, and we need to be able to handle all of the anticipated emergency vehicles as well as the workers' cars. Could you confirm that you have reviewed the entire site and find that the entire site can handle all of those anticipated vehicle movements?
Yes, and this basically reiterates what Mr. Zugman said at the beginning of the application. I believe he met with the fire department, if I'm not mistaken. We have full circulation around the building. All of the aisles where the large trucks will negotiate the site have been essentially over-designed to account for that activity and to account for the backing maneuvers that they will need to make to get into the loading docks up against the building. Those areas have been designed to be very generous. I believe we have approximately 135 feet between the face of the building and the curb in that area where the trucks will maneuver. We normally look to get about 120 feet, so we've got an extra 15 feet or so. That was done on purpose. And so the on-site circulation will function safely and efficiently. The parking that is provided for the employees and visitors is 105 parking stalls, passenger stalls. That also meets the township ordinance requirement. So this has all been designed in accordance with proper traffic engineering principles. And as I've indicated, the on-site and off-site circulation will function safely and efficiently with the improvements that we've proposed.
Mr. Chair, I have nothing further of Mr. Ray. He's available to you.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. Okay, earlier in the testimony, it was testimony that there are gates that's in the drive. Is there enough queuing spot to where if you get 5 or 6 trucks there, they'll be able to queue on site and not queue on Fairfield Road?
Mr. Nansen, I'm looking at the plans that I have, and I'm not sure I see the detail for where the gates are. I might have to punt that back to Lou.
Yeah, I think.
So I'm going to probably do that. I don't see that detail on the plan, so I'm not certain of where they are.
Okay.
I can identify, there's actually a significant amount of on-site queuing. The gates are in the rear where you get to the back of the building.
Okay.
And they are where you've already turned not just into the site, but into the front loading area. And they would not necessarily be closed throughout the day, just at certain hours or times of low activity, they might be closed for control of the site.
Yeah, but would there be enough queuing to where you're not going to queue, or you're not going to have trucks lined up to gain entrance to the site on Fairfield Road?
Correct. You'd have queuing for multiple trucks to the front, and to the back you'd have queuing of hundreds of feet.
Okay. So
now that I see where they are, I agree.
Okay, so you would not mind stipulating in your resolution that there would be no queuing of trucks on Fairfield Road?
We would be pleased to make that stipulation.
Okay. Okay.
And have signage for enforcement purposes.
Okay, sir. Okay, Charlie.
So just back on the topic of the gates real quick. So Ken, the applicant will provide knock boxes for the fire department for those, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That was
All right.
Chief Lewis.
All right. And then just going back to the Route 33 interchange, I wasn't able to attend that meeting. I think there was a little bit of a mix up with the scheduling on it, but I did review the memo. And I can confirm what Mr. Ray provided testimony as to what the improvements were kind of discussed based on that memo. I will say in the traffic report, and John, you can back me up if I'm saying this incorrectly. The left turn onto Route 33 bypass to head westbound. Your analysis found that there was enough space for vehicles to queue, or that there was only like a one truck queue that would build up in that left turn lane going on to Route 33 during the peak hour?
That's correct, Charlie. I think that was one of the items in your first review letter that you asked us to evaluate, and we did that. We looked at the capacity printouts, and that in fact is the case.
Okay. And then I think there was a comment in your letter that you increased the distribution of truck to that intersection from 2 to 10%, and it was still a level of service B. I would just ask, as a condition of any approval, you just amend your traffic report to include that additional calculation, just so it's there for a matter of record. I do want to point out for the board's perspective, obviously restricting the trucks making a left turn out of the site controls them coming out of the site. I was kind of hoping to hear some testimony from John about trucks coming to the site. Are there anything with the existing interchange or intersection at 524, which would kind of like maybe the configuration make it tough for vehicles, WB 67s to navigate that turn that might orient them to come from Route 33 as opposed to from the south at 524?
I have thought about that, and I've looked at where Route 524 goes and east and west, and I really, in looking at where the roads go, I really think, given our proximity to Route 33, no matter where the trucks are coming from or going to, even if they're coming off Interstate 195, for example, they could come up Route 34 and then head, back to the west on 33. We can also, and I don't want to put words in my attorney's mouth, but I know in cases like this, what our clients have also agreed to is put the truck routes in the tenants' leases, that they have, the trucks have to use certain roads. We really don't want them going down to the south on Fairfield Road. And Ken, I guess if that's something we can consider.
Yes, it is. Mr. Chairman and board members, we've been doing warehouses almost full time now for the last year, and that type of a provision has become a very common provision, that there would be any lease between the property owner and a tenant would include instructions on truck traffic movements, and we would agree to that.
Well, see, I just got to say, coming off of 524, if they're coming in from Farmingdale, making that turn, that house is right there on that corner. And
we don't want them doing that, Mr. Nancy.
That is a tight corner.
Yeah.
Understood.
Okay.
So, and then just to kind of clarify for the board too, Mr. Chair, so that's just the truck traffic. So there is a possibility you will have employee traffic coming from the south. So Mr. Ray, do you know how many peak hour trips that would be approximately to the south? Just for the board's perspective.
I'll take a quick look at the existing. We're looking at pretty light traffic, less than 10 peak hour trips, which would be employees to and from the south.
And that's below the threshold of 100 trips that would warrant any analysis of that signalization to the south?
Yes, the signal at Fairfield Road and 524, we would have less than 10 peak hour trips, and they would all be passenger cars going through that intersection. And as Charlie indicated, the IT threshold for when you need to do an offsite traffic analysis is 100 peak hour trips. So we would only be a fraction of that. We're going to have a minimal impact on that intersection.
So, and then the last comment is kind of something Louis can comment on too. I do want to note the DOT right away to the north, or parcels to the north, kind of have a funky configuration as it comes across the applicant's frontage. I guess at some point they might have contemplated a different interchange, eastbound ramp coming off there. So there is like a 5-foot sliver that gets wider across their frontage where their driveway does cross into their northernmost driveway. I would just ask Mr. Ray, in their process of getting their plans finalized for the intersection of Route 33. They just petitioned DOT that, they have no issue with that driveway configuration coming across their parcel there.
No problem. I think we had a similar issue with the NJNG application on the other side of Fairfield Road. There was something with the right of way. I forget exactly what it was, but no issue whatsoever.
And that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Jen?
I know you use ITE when you're calculating the trip generation, but you're talking about 14 AM peak trips for trucks and 14 PM peak trips. I mean, this is almost a 400,000 square foot building with a number of loading bays. I'm just concerned that those numbers are a little low.
I don't believe they are, Jen. You and I we're still going through this in Manalapan with a bigger warehouse project. And those numbers are basically straight from the ITE, from Land Use Code 150.
Right, so I mean, is this just, but are those, I mean, listen, I don't.
They're generic, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to dredge up that entire debacle, but is that just warehouse or is that distribution? Because we went through this before where the distribution is higher than code 150 and that would generate more than 14 trips, right?
Not necessarily, because as not to rehash the Manalapan testimony,
yeah.
but we do have some research traffic counts that we've conducted at some of these large warehouse facilities in Cranberry and in Monroe. And they are distribution facilities, and they're actually generating traffic at a rate less than the ITE Land Use Code 150 rate. And,
right,
it is. I think because of the one Amazon warehouse out in Robbinsville that was a disaster for a year or two, everybody has gotten nervous about these facilities, but realistically, outside of that experience, most of these warehouses are generating traffic at a rate lower than the ITE suggests.
And the peak hour is what time?
Well, that's an interesting thing because there are two peak. There's the peak hour for the generator, which is the building itself, which tends to be offset from the peak hour on the street. The peak hour on the street generally occurs 8 to 9 a.m. in this area and 4:30 to 5:30 in the afternoon. My expectation is that the truck traffic is going to peak before 8 to 9 a.m. and probably before 4:30 to 5:30 p.m. Based on the counts that we've done, the truck peak hour seems to be, based on those counts that I talked about in Cranberry and Monroe, the truck peak hour tend to be like 6:30 to 7:30 in the morning before the roadway peak and 3 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon before the afternoon peak. So there is an offset there between the peak hours for the facility itself and what's on the street and what's on the roadway already.
All right, I'm not doubting your calculations. It just seemed for a facility of almost 400,000 square feet, it just seems like the numbers are pretty low, that's all.
Well, I think, Jen, if you look at the number of parking spaces that we've provided, I think it's 105, which meets the ordinance requirement.
Yeah.
If you really, you think about that, I don't think a tenant that has a very super busy fulfillment center type operation is going to want this building because quite frankly, there won't be enough parking for their clients.
Got it.
That's a limiting factor.
Okay. I just wanted to ask the question and get it on the record. That's all I have.
Understood.
I think that just to wash that Amazon building off everybody's imagination, that building was a little more than 2,400,000 square feet and had 3,000 employees. Not here. Just don't even think about that building or its operation.
Mr. Cantor. Any questions, Mr. Cantor?
Now I'm on. No questions.
Okay. Mr. Hughes.
No, I'm good, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Moretti.
No, sir, I'm good.
Mr. Roscoe.
I'm okay, thanks.
Okay. Where'd Mertens go?
There he is.
Mr. Merton. Mr. Merton, any questions, sir? You okay?
You have to nod your head.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
Hey, at this time, can I get a motion to open the public for questions only?
I'll make a motion to open the public, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Mr. Hughes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Roscoe. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Eileen, at this time, we'll take questions. Mr. Ray?
At this time, the chairman has opened the meeting up to members of the public for questions of Mr. Ray, the traffic expert. If anyone has any questions for Mr. Ray, please use the raise your hand feature and we will move you into the meeting. Thank you. Mr. Cohen is back.
Okay.
You have to unmute yourself. Okay.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. Thomas J. Cohen. Mr. Ray, would you mind going through that again, the number one of the pre-application determinations with DOT? I kind of missed that. I apologize.
Yeah, we had a pre-application meeting with the DOT because when we initially got involved in the project and we looked at the intersection of Business Route 33 and Fairfield Road, and also the ramps, specifically the eastbound off-ramp, we noticed that the geometry of those intersections would need to be modified in order to accommodate the largest vehicle which could be anticipated, which would be a WB 67. And so we laid the turning radius templates on the intersection and on the off-ramp and determined that the radius on the eastbound off-ramp needed to be increased to 50 feet in order to accommodate that turning movement. And for the left turn for a truck heading west on Business Route 33, turning left onto Fairfield Road, if you know there's a small concrete median on Fairfield Road, that's going to have to be cut back approximately 20 feet to accommodate the turning radius of the truck. And we've agreed to make those improvements and fund them. And the DOT, of course, would have to approve the engineering plans, but they conceptually agreed to it at the pre-application meeting.
And my other question is about the cartways on the entrances. Was there previous testimony that they were 30 feet wide as opposed to 25?
I think Mr. Zugna testified they were 40 feet, but I'll go back to him. I know they're more than 25. They could scale it.
The tractor, the main entries and the loop around the outside are 30 feet in width. The aisles are 30 feet.
So, Mr. Sugner, how wide is the entire curb cut on each entrance?
Oh, at the entranceway?
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm scaling it, including the radius, the two radii to be about 80 feet, the curb
80
line
feet?
opening.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Ray. I appreciate it.
Good to see you, TJ.
Thank you, sir. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Anybody else from the public?
Are there any other members of the public that wish to ask questions of Mr. Ray? Please raise your hand. We're not seeing any other people raising their hands.
Can we have a motion to close public?
Make a motion to close the public.
Motion by Mr. Cantor.
Moretti.
Moretti, okay. I can barely see you, Mr. Moretti.
He's got my little head there. That's it.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Seconded by Mr. Hughes. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Mr. Pate, how long do you think Christine is going to take?
Yeah.
I think that Christine's direct testimony before this board is going to conclude in 15 minutes or less.
Okay.
And Christine is our final witness this evening, Mr. Chair. Is that acceptable?
Mr. Tropley, that acceptable? Can we just try to close this up?
I think we can do a very good job within a half hour on everything, Mr. Chair,
Okay.
in my opinion.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Pate.
Thank you. Ms. Cofone, if you could briefly share with this board your professional educational background before testifying.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Pape, and members of the board. For the record, Christina Zarro-Cofone. I've been qualified as an expert in Howell before the zoning board, as well as about 400 other planning and zoning boards throughout the state of New Jersey. I've been practicing as a consulting planner for about 24 or 25 years now. I am also an adjunct land use instructor for the Rutgers Center for Government Services, where I teach planning and zoning courses. And I'm an affordable housing special master in about 30 different municipalities, and we do some municipal planning as well.
We accept your credentials, Ms. Call.
Thank you.
Ms. Cofone, I'm going to ask that you be thorough and efficient in your testimony. We have an obligation to identify the variance relief and to provide the proofs that this board needs to hear in order to be empowered to grant the relief that we request. I'm going to ask if you would, in a narrative fashion, take us through those proofs.
Of course. So yes, I'll start with the D variances. We are here seeking a D variance because the proposed warehousing facility is not a permitted use in the HD2 zone. While that is a commercial zoning district and Fairfield Road is certainly dominated by commercial uses, the warehousing use is not permissible in the underlying HD2 zoning. I will talk a little bit later in my testimony about your most recent master plan reexamination, which actually calls for a change to the SED zone, which would allow for this type of use. However, as it stands today, the current zoning governing the property does not allow for the use. We're also seeking a D variance for the two principal uses on one property, being the solar fields. So I would submit to the board that certainly this site is particularly suitable for both the warehousing use as well as to maintain the two uses on one lot. The site, as you know, is a large site. You heard our engineer, Mr. Zugner, testify that the site is in excess of 100 acres, and that certainly we have adequate space to accommodate this proposed warehousing facility, which would sit on about 36 of those acres. You also heard Mr. Zugner testify earlier this evening when he put up one of the earlier exhibits that the subject property, while located in the HD2 zone, is the only zoned property that's HD2 along Fairfield and is contiguous to 3 other SED zones. Given those facts and the fact that there isn't a conservation easement encumbering a substantial portion of the front of the property, as well as a solar farm existing on the property today, I think the board could look at all of those factors and come to the conclusion. Oh, I should also add about the extensive frontage. We have significant frontage on Fairfield, which allows us to place those two driveways some 800 feet from each other. So certainly that lends itself to being particularly suitable for the proposed warehousing use. So you don't, as a board, have to find that this property is only or ideally suited only for this use, just that there's things about this property that render it particularly suitable for the proposed warehouse use. And I think I just cited that the size, the frontage, the contiguousness to the 3 SED zones, the presence of the conservation easement and the solar field are all things that informed my decision that this is certainly particularly suitable. So with that, because we are a non-inherently beneficial use, we have to demonstrate, in addition to site suitability, that one or more of the purposes of the land use law or special reasons would exist or be offered or furthered by the grant of this variance. I would submit to the board that there are a number of positive criteria, and they come right out of section 40:55D-2 of the land use law. They're not unique to Howell. They're certainly not my crafty planning language. So the language that I use will come right from the statute and the letters. I think in this particular instance, the board can rely on criteria A, which talks about promoting the general welfare. Here you have a unique situation where this applicant is going to significant lengths to improve and to bring sewer to this area, to the unsewered area. So I think that that is certainly a public benefit, as well as making some significant roadway improvements along Fairfield. So while sometimes we find it peculiar to rely on criteria A for a non-inherently beneficial use variance, I think in this, and having testified on hundreds of these variances, I can say that in this case, I think that it is appropriate for the board to rely on criteria A, which talks about promoting the general welfare. Criteria B of the land use law talks about promoting safety from flooding. And one of the things that you heard earlier tonight was that we are seeking some relief to keep our swales or to increase our swales in the farmland buffer. And I think what you heard Mr. Zugner testify to was that he was going to ameliorate some of the conditions, the flooding conditions on Fairfield, that those conditions exist today. And not only would they not be exacerbated by this application, but they would actually be improved by this application. So that's why I feel comfortable relying on criteria B. Criteria G talks about sufficient space in appropriate locations for a variety of uses. Let me just read to you briefly a small excerpt from your last master plan from November 2019, which reads on page 31, there was a recommendation to rezone the properties along Fairfield Road just south of Route 33 from the Highway Development 2, HD2 district, to the Special Economic District, Development, SED district. These properties, which do not have frontage on Route 33, are currently developed with a solar energy utility installation, which is a permitted use in the SED district. So I do think that there is sufficient space, and I do think that this is an appropriate location, given the fact that your master plan recommends change to the SED zone, which would then allow this use that's before you tonight to be an as-of-right use. Criteria I talks about a desirable visual environment. I know that Mr. Rosidi has worked very hard to garner the compliment of your planner, Ms. Beam, on the architecture of this. I know, having worked on several of these warehouse facilities, not just throughout the state, but in Howell, I know that that is no small accomplishment. So I feel as though, you know, we have Mr. Rosidi went earlier in the night through the color changes and the material changes, and some of the things that he has added to his building to increase the curb appeal and comply with your ordinance. So I think here, reliance on criteria I is earned by his design of this project. And lastly, criteria M, which talks about an efficient use of the land. I think that this is an opportunity for the township to take advantage of having these two uses here. The solar farm being a very passive use, it doesn't have employees, and this more commercial use to really capture what you consider in your master plan to, I think, be consistent with this area. In addition to that 2019 master plan recommending a change to the SED zone, there was a stated goal in that master plan that I thought was really on point for this application, which was to encourage new businesses and industries to locate along the township's highway corridors, which will grow the economy of Howell and provide new services and potential opportunities for residents. So I think that this does all of that, and I think it's quite efficient. So I think we certainly substantiate our burden of proof with respect to particular suitability, as well as the positive criteria. We have also a burden of proof to demonstrate that the negative criteria is satisfied. And the negative criteria really has two prongs to it. The one prong being the impact on your zone plan here in Howell, the other prong being the impact on the properties around you. So I'll talk about the zone plan first, and then I'll talk about the surrounding properties, because that will allow me then to segue into the bulk variances that we need, because I think we need to talk about the buffering. So as far as the impact on the zone plan, when you look at the stated purpose of the HD2 zone, it talks about the purpose of that zone being providing for the appropriate non-retail development along the Route 33 corridor. So this property is not along the Route 33 corridor. So it seems to me from a planning point of view, that is not particularly what was envisioned when the township created the HD2 zone. More importantly, your master plan recommends a change to the SED, and this use would absolutely be consistent as warehousing is permitted as of right in that district. And additionally, there are many other warehouses along Fairfield. So we are not introducing the warehouse concept or the truck traffic or things associated with that into this corridor. They exist today, so I can confidently tell you that I see no substantial detriment. And again, the board does not, the land use law does not ask you to hold us that there be no detriment, just the benefits of the grant of this variance outweigh any detriment. So I see no substantial detriment to the impact on the zone plan. And I think that this development is exactly what your most recent master plan, which was done just about a year ago. It was done in November of 2019. So this is really, to me, what your vision for this area is, despite the fact that the underlying zoning hasn't quite caught up yet. And then when you look at the purpose of the SED zone, it's to provide for a variety of economic development opportunities in areas of the township where highway infrastructure is readily available. So I think that we are certainly spot on, consistent with that purpose. So that informs my decision that we're not going to have a substantial detriment on your zone plan here in Howell. There are also a number of C variances associated with this application, and Mr. Cunliffe went through them earlier, but some of them relate to the buffer. As you saw from the plans that Mr. Zugner presented earlier, we are now showing our 50-foot farmland buffer on the property. However, we are seeking some relief because we don't have, on our southern property line, we are not buffering our conservation easement, which there were 4 words that Mr. Zugner referred to when he was talking about our buffer and the concept of it that I thought were really compelling. They were plantings, gradings, maintaining, and enhancing, because there's 2 concepts there. The buffer is really comprised of what's in the buffer as far as plantings that we're proposing, but also the grading is important because we are providing some level of elevation grade to the berming to have the screening, but then also maintaining and enhancing. Because when you saw the earlier exhibits that were presented, and I think Shari had said it earlier, Ms. Bureau said it earlier, this is really one of those sites that you're going to have to go out into the field and see what's there and supplement. We know that we're going to have to supplement, but Ms. Spiro said, and I think she was very correct when she described the site, this is one of those that is going to be done in the field when we go out there collectively, our professionals with your professionals to identify. So that's where you get the maintaining and the enhancing, because there really is some substantial vegetation out there, but there's also some great opportunities for us to enhance that as well. So I think that while we are seeking some variance relief, there's a conservation easement on the property. So I think what you have before you is you have a trusted applicant who has some history in town. As Chairman Nansen said earlier in the evening, he has always done what he said he would do. And I think the board certainly can impose conditions that would require us to supplement that buffer. But I think the board can rely on the C1 criteria there because for the grant of these buffers, because the presence of certain conditions on a piece of property, unique features of a specific piece of property, are what lends themselves to the board relying on that. And I think the preservation of the conservation easement there allows us to rely on criteria C1. We are also asking for a relief from the 100-foot stream corridor buffer, as Mr. Cunliffe stated earlier this evening. Our structures are out of, well, the basins are out of that now, but we do have those riprap structures that are in those areas, and they're, again, somewhat passive type of structures, and I see no substantial detriment to having those there. We will maintain the farmland buffer and we will have it screened. The other 2 variances that we need are for the accessory structures in the front yard setbacks. We have the hot box and the pump station, which are both within the front yard setback. Now, they are not within that 50-foot farmland buffer, but they are within the technical front yard setback, and they're set back at about 60 feet. So that to me is something that I think the board can be comfortable, again, that we will screen those structures and they're set back far enough off the road that they're not going to have a substantial detriment. I think you also have to look at the fact that the hot box and the pump station are not structures that are large structures where employees are going or you're going to have people in there. So I don't think that you have to consider the massing of those 2 structures when you have them along Fairfield as well. And then I think the board can be very comfortable that when you consider what those actual structures are and what their impact, that having them in the technical front yard setback, but well without, not in the farmland buffer, that you can come to the conclusion that that's an appropriate location for them and any negative impact of them can be appropriately screened. So this is a non-inherently beneficial use, so we do have to reconcile the Medici reconciliation of the township's continued omission of this from the zone plan, but it seems to me that based on your master planning documents, that that's really not the desire or the intent of the township to go. And I think, again, when you look at the purposes of the HD2 zone, it seems to sort of miss the mark on the subject property because we're not even located along the 33 corridor as far as our frontage that's developed. So it's hard to envision that this site not being developed in accordance with those uses would have any type of substantial detriment. So I think holistically, in my opinion, as a planner, we substantiate our burden of proof for the grant of the D variances as well as the C variances. I understand we are now deferring the sign package to our final approval, so I don't need to comment on that at this time. I'm trying to be efficient here, so Mr. Pape, I hope I've covered everything I was supposed to cover. If I didn't, I'm sure we can go back, but I think that's most, I don't want to say all because I'm really trying to move it along here. I think that that's most of what I intended to get out tonight in my testimony. So,
Christine, I think that your testimony was complete. Now the most important person to tell us if it's complete will be the board members and Ms.
So, Mr. Chair, I take no exception to the testimony regarding the D variances. I do think that the recent recommendation in the master plan to rezone the property to SED is significant. I will state, in addition to that, if you go back beyond the most recent re-exam, there were a number of recommendations dating back to, I want to say 2016, 2015, that had also made recommendations to have this entire area in some form of the SED zoning district. So
I think it was before then too, Jim.
it could have been, yeah. So, you know, I do think that the application does meet the requirements of particular suitability as well as a significant number of goals of zoning that are being advanced. I think that the sewer improvements are significant, and that would be a significant benefit to not only this project but to the area in general. As well as the roadway improvements. And given the limitations on the turning out of the driveways for the truck traffic, directing all the trucks up to 33, I don't feel that there's a negative impact associated with the application. Moving to the bulk variances, I don't know that I would go as far as to call it a C1. I do think that it would still meet the prongs for a C2 with respect to the intrusion into the 100-foot stream corridor for the outfall structures. I agree with Charlie that that's an acceptable condition and we take no exception. And again, also with the hot box and the pump station, it's going to be behind the berm, setback out of the farmland buffer. So, you know, I don't take any exception. And quite honestly, there's not a ton of control over where these structures get located. You know, they're regulated by the water company and as far as where the sewer can be connected, etc. So I think they're adequately screened, and I know Shari's going to make sure that we're not going to see them from the road. So I don't take any exception to that. Now, I know this is a hot one for you, Mr. Chair, with respect to the farmland buffer. And as long as I've known you, I know this has been an issue for you. But the impact to the farm buffer is an existing swale. It's not anything that the applicant is putting in that area, and as was testified by both Mr. Zugner and Ms. Cafone, it's ameliorating an existing flooding condition along the roadway. Removing it to get it out of that would be a negative impact to the area, and it isn't a swale that's been there. If they were putting drainage structures into that area, I would have a different opinion. But I do think that in working with Shari, making sure that the berming is there and the landscaping is there, the 4-season buffer, I think they can adequately screen the frontage of this building from Fairfield Road. And then I would take no exception should the board act affirmatively on that relief. There's actually 3 different sections of the buffer ordinance that needs relief, but it's all related to that swale that's located in that area. So that being said, you know, I would take no exception for the board to act affirmatively on both the D variances as well as preliminary site plan. They do have a little work to do before they come back for final with respect to the HVAC and some view shed issues. But I do think that they have done a comprehensive job to get through the use variance and the preliminary site plan this evening.
Oh, that was a mouthful.
Yep.
Okay, as far as the farmland buffer, I know Mr. Cohen is present through these hearings. So my thing is, once the sewer is there, I feel that the property that is actually the farm is going to go away anyway.
Probably.
it's going to be developed at some time. So, you know, I wouldn't take exception to the farmland.
Oh my God, I don't think I've ever heard you say that.
Yeah, but you got to hear me out with that. What we're talking about with the farmland is technically in that buffer, it's going to eliminate a lot of the drainage problems.
Agreed.
So, you know, you got to weigh this. A lot of the farmland buffers that we're asked to grant relief to is because they want to use that property for different types of uses. This is not. This is to eliminate a water issue that's been there on both sides of the road. And by regrading that, doing what they got to do there, is going to eliminate the problem that's on the farm itself. It's going to help that water drain out more so.
Plus, you have the road. I mean, typically when we see a farm buffer, it's a lot line that's immediately adjacent to a farm. You have the road separating this development from the property across the street as well.
And it's backing water back up into the farm. This is going to help eliminate that.
I agree.
To a certain extent. So, you know, I don't take exception to that. So, anyway. Okay, Charlie, you have...
It's not really any comments or questions for Ms. Cafone. I just want to do a couple quick comments before Ken does this summation. I just want to note in my letter, the applicant already agreed that they were going to do right-of-way dedication along the property frontage, 8 foot wide. They agreed to provide site triangle easements for the driveways. I believe they also agreed to provide like a meets and bounds description for the lease area at the front of the site. Also like an access easement or description for the solar field. You know, obviously they're going to use the new site driveway. So they agreed to provide that. The last thing that I just want to note, the conservation easement to the south, obviously that was dedicated prior for wetlands delineation. So I have no issue with that. There is some wetlands on the property to the north. I think it's the Stavola property. And their 50-foot buffer does encroach along the northerly property line. So I would just ask that the applicant get an updated LOI for that area and then obviously get the necessary TAW permit for the buffer averaging along the property there.
All acceptable, Mr. Cunliffe.
That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay, board members, Mr. Roscoe. Okay, Mr. Cantor.
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hughes.
No questions of Ms. Cafone. Thank you.
Mr. Merton.
No questions.
Mr. Moretti.
No questions.
I have a motion to open the public for questions.
Make an
Let's go
open,
ahead.
make that request.
Let's go ahead and take questions and comments at this time. Do I have a motion?
Make that motion, Moretti.
Mr. Moretti, do I have a second?
Second. Answer.
Second by Mr. Roscoe. All in favor?
Yeah.
All
Aye.
opposed? Okay, Eileen, want to open for questions and comments?
Yes, I will. Okay, at this time, the chairman has opened the hearing up for members of the public for questions or comments. So anyone who has any questions or comments about the application, please use the raise your hand feature and you will be moved into the meeting one at a time. Thank you. And we have Mr. Cohen back for questions or comments. And you're muted. Okay, you're back.
Thanks so much. No, Ms. Cafone did a wonderful presentation, and I'm not going to ask her any questions because she covered everything. But, you know, having intimate knowledge of this area and managing the property across the street at 177 lot 8.01, 393 Fairfield Road, and having intimate knowledge of working with Mr. Wong on the Monmouth Athletic Center and working in conjunction with him on that project years ago. As the chairman will note, this is a much needed improvement. He really is entitled to the zone change if he chose to request it. Instead, he chose to come here to this forum and present the full plan, which I admire. And I think it's going to be a wonderful benefit. It's nice that the master plan covered the change for Mr. Wong, and his offsite improvements are just a boon to the area. And I think this should be approved for the use variance and the C variances as specified. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Eileen, anybody else?
Anyone else looking to make comments or questions regarding this application? Please raise your hand. We can give it a minute, but so far I do not see anyone else raising their hand.
Okay. We've got a lot of people out there too, so. Still nobody?
Still no one raising their hand. We'll give it one more call. Anyone willing to ask or wanting to ask questions or comments on the application, please raise your hand now before the chairman closes the public portion. We're not seeing anyone, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, can I have a motion to close public?
I'll make a motion to close.
I'll second it.
Mr. Hughes, and seconded by Mr. Moretti. All in favor?
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed? Okay, any further from my professionals or the board's professionals?
No, sir.
Mr. Pate?
Nothing from me, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Pate, you want to do your summation here?
I do, and I want to be very brief, in part because Thomas Cohn did a very nice job for me, and in part because I've watched the entire evening as every single member of this board has paid such close attention to all of the details that was so apparent by the examination that was made by the board members of the witnesses. I think that this is an application where your applicant, Mr. Wong, begins by saying, I'm not entitled to this, but I'm ready to earn it. And he begins by saying, I'll bring sewer to the area that benefits not only me, but it benefits others. It begins by saying the road needs work. You've asked me to make improvements to the roadway, and he has said yes. He further earned it when he was brought to his attention that certain restrictions would make this use more palatable to the community. Such restrictions as not allowing truck traffic to move towards Route 524. And I believe that the aesthetic treatment of the building and the aesthetic treatment of the site, where there's prolific landscaping already shown and a commitment for even further landscaping, all are demonstrations of Mr. Wong saying, I came here to earn the approval. And I also believe that knowing that the Fairfield Road development already includes a number of warehouses, knowing that our site is 700 feet from the Route 33 interchange, will be the closest warehouse to the interchange, and that our truck traffic is just going to be blending in with the truck traffic that's already on the road and not increasing traffic across the residential communities that are located to the south of us. I'm very comfortable asking the board this evening to favorably consider the use variance relief, the limited bulk variance relief that we trimmed back this evening, and the preliminary site plan, knowing that we will return to this board only when we have worked out all of those details that we promised to do so this evening. With that, I thank all of you for listening to us and giving us the time this evening, and respectfully ask that you consider the application favorably.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pate.
Thank you.
Okay, any further from the board?
No, sir.
What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to approve this application. I believe the professionals did a great job with all their questions. I think the applicant's testimony was well done. I'm very impressed with the fact that this site is enhancing it. And I think the improvements in this area is really beneficial to all. And last, I think it was great that the a lot of the plants are staying there, the trees. and implementing new landscaping, I think it's going to be a no-brainer for this town, and I'm going to make the motion to approve.
I'm gonna put a halt here real quick. Mr. Pape, we only have 6 members tonight. I should have thought of that before I called for that motion.
Mr.
It's
Chairman,
totally up to you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask that you continue with the vote this evening, please.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Mertens. Do I have a second?
Second.
Who?
You're ready.
Mr. Moretti. Okay, you second it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Eileen, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, you may. Mr. Hughes.
Yeah, I just want to add also to the being thankful, about the improvements in the area too. I can't stress that enough with, running the sewer and the water on the road running off. It's appreciated that that was taken into consideration in this plan. And with that, I vote yes.
Thank you. Mr. Mertens.
Yes.
Mr. Moretti.
Yes.
Mr. Orozco.
Yes.
Mr. Cantor.
Mr. Chairman, if you indulge me for about a minute, I just want to say thank you to all of the professionals for the education, the tremendous education on New Jersey land use that you provided to me and my fellow board members tonight. This live presentation of this information was just, to me, fascinating. So thank you, everybody, for the great testimony. And I'm voting yes as well because I'm impressed by the improvements that the owner is making to the property, but with the stipulation that we recommend traffic improvements are made to that intersection on Fairfield Road and Route 33. So that's a yes vote.
Thank you. And Chairman Nansen.
I too want to reiterate my fellow board members. I really thank y'all for listening, participating. I really think the professional testimony from the applicant and then along with our board professionals. I really, really appreciate this. Met with the applicant, worked a lot of these details out. It's coming in like I know Mr. Pape is going to put forward anytime he is before this board. So my vote is yes, and I really thank Mr. Wong for taking this and walking with it. Not really walking with it, but running with it. I really appreciate that. And I know it's a benefit for this township, regardless of what ratables going in there. This is a major benefit for this township. So thank you, Mr. Wong. Thank you, Mr. Pape.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, to all of you, thank you from me and from the Wong family and all of our professionals. Thank you. And good night.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Congratulations and good luck, Mr. Wong, and look forward to seeing you at the final site plan here.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, since we don't have vouchers to pay professionals, do I have a motion to adjourn, or is there any further business of the board?
I have nothing further.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn, Mr. Chair.
Okay, motion by Mr. Hughes. Do I have a second? Who?
I'll second that, Mr. Cantor.
Mr. Cantor, second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed. I want to thank the board members and our professionals, all of y'all, for hanging in there and getting this one done. I think it's a very big benefit to the township, what they're proposing there, regardless of the building that's going on. I think just bringing that sewer down to 33 is just going to benefit a lot of us. So, thank y'all for hanging in there and getting this application through.
Our pleasure.
Making a lot of improvements in that area. The light,
Absolutely.
sewer, widening the road, doing a great job.
Eileen and Matt, we really appreciate y'all, you know, how y'all run this meeting on the Zoom. It's,
Yeah, the top.
it's over the top, and I really appreciate it. You know,
Excellent.
I know it just, you know, there's a lot of technical and a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that, you know, none of us know what's going on, but I know it's a lot. So I appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
I second that.
Yes.
I third it.
Okay, guys, we'll see y'all at next meeting. That's next Monday.
Next Monday, I'll send the agenda out tomorrow.
Okay, at 7 o'clock, remember.
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock.
Thank you.
Okay, y'all have a good rest of your week here, and we'll see y'all next Monday.
All right, take care now.
Take care, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye. Ron, get better.
Thank you.